Chapter 598. A ferocious flame-bellied monitor lizard was half lying on the ground. Even so, it was still as tall as a person. Below its belly was the slowly flowing lava. Not only did the lava of nearly 1,000 degrees not destroy its limbs, but it also provided it with the energy to persist. This was a very suitable battlefield for the flame-bellied monitor lizard. As far as the eye could see, dark red lava could be seen everywhere. Some of it flowed down the hill, and some simply gushed out between the heavily cracked ground. Although it was not as powerful as an explosive eruption, the scene of the earth cracking everywhere, as if it could completely collapse at any time, was equally thrilling. In a similar environment, the flame-bellied monitor lizard had killed countless invaders, and its total size could even fill the crater behind it. Almost all of its prey could not resist the fire poison it sprayed, and it could not resist the destructive lava it controlled. But at this moment, before it could cause any fatal damage to the metal creation in front of it, its tail and one of its forelimbs had been cut off, and it had lost most of its mobility. The lava fire intertwined with the gray sky light, but it was difficult to illuminate the specially treated armor coating, as if there was always a blurry dark domain. This grayish-black metal creation was only about 20 meters away from it. In the past, it could have pounced, but now it could only desperately accumulate strength, use the special abdomen of the mutated evolution to absorb the heat of the lava, and then open its mouth wide. Buzz! The heavy alloy javelin, carrying lightning, entered the mouth of the flame-bellied monitor lizard, and a small part of it penetrated its back. It exploded like a high-explosive bomb, magma splattered everywhere, and scales flew everywhere. Immediately, blazing electric flames shot out from the mouth, eye sockets, wounds, and even the cracks in the outer skin of the scale armor. The 2-ton body of the flame-bellied monitor lizard shrank in the blink of an eye. Its special body structure, which had evolved from the mutation, was also completely destroyed by this round of damage. The high temperature of the lava was finally revealed at this moment, and a small part of the body of the giant lizard was swallowed in a breath. However, in the burning flames of the giant lizard, there was still a blood-colored light. Electromagnetic Vanguard 1 silently stepped forward, stepping on the flat head of the flame-bellied monitor lizard, and also on the slowly flowing magma, walking to the top of the hill. The modified body based on the Sergeant X-2 model did not have the ability to resist the lava for a long time. However, when the high-temperature lava tried to devour the metal leg, it was repelled by an invisible force and slowly moved away. Number 1 crossed the line of defense of the giant fire-bellied lizards, and set foot on the top of the erupting volcano. Now the volcanic area that appeared in the optical imaging system was a real volcanic area. Within a radius of several hundred square kilometers, at least 70 to 80% of the craters were emitting thick smoke and lava. Dark red lines of fire crisscrossed the ground, cutting the area into pieces. Luonan had actually completed the goal of the first stage after killing the flame-belly monitor lizard. Although the Guardians, who had retreated under the control of the Vulcan ants, had already gathered in the central area and rebuilt the defensive line, most of them were unable to burrow underground and bathe in the lava to enter the core area. Number 1 could do it. Under Luonan's control, this combat machine stepped directly into the boiling pool of lava under the protection of a powerful magnetic shield. Of course, it was just passing by. Soon, it locked onto a certain gap in the inner wall of the volcano. It blasted apart a chunk of rock that had just been congealed and piled up not too long ago, revealing a narrow crack illuminated by the lava. Luonan's civil engineering isn't bad. What should be praised was that Luonan was able to utilize the terrain to the greatest limit with his meticulous senses and reconnaissance over the past few days. He was able to open up a subway line to bypass the congestion on the surface. Number 1 was not the only passerby in this narrow passageway. The lava was like a flowing stream beneath its feet, extending even further into the crack. The densely packed Vulcan ants were lined up in rows within the hissing flowing lava. They borrowed the power of the lava to move faster. Their speed was not much slower than a normal person's walking speed. The Vulcan ants did not possess complete individual thinking, but they possessed a powerful group consciousness. Luonan could feel the faint evil intent that came from the nothingness, but this squad of Vulcan ants was still restrained by a high degree of discipline. They ignored the damage caused by the stomp of the combat machine and continued to flow back to the core area. The formation of the ant colony had yet to end when a buzzing sound assaulted them from within the dust-filled air. It was as if a swarm of locusts had passed through. A dark red cloud of blood suddenly gushed out from the crevice to the side. There were hundreds of thousands of winged Vulcan ants. They did not have the ability to fly long distances, but they were still able to advance forward at a faster speed within this narrow passageway. This speed was just about the same as Number One's advancing speed. Number One was submerged within the cloud of blood as expected. Lava and the cloud of blood extended forward within the long and narrow crevice. There was a certain section in the middle that flickered with electricity and fire irregularly. This was the phenomenon formed by the electromagnetic shield repelling and killing the surrounding Vulcan ants. The surroundings were densely packed with flying ants, and their feet were even stepping on the lava. They were just remote-controlled combat machines. They were not here in person. Otherwise, Luonan could not guarantee that he would be able to maintain a calm state of mind. They were both Vulcan ants. They crawled within the lava and flew within the crevice, but there was a large difference in their body shape and body structure. But this was not strange in a volcanic area. According to Luonan's reconnaissance over the past 2 days, there were hundreds and thousands of Vulcan ant nests within a radius of 200 kilometers. They were widely distributed, and the direction of mutation evolution was a bit different within every nest. And since the lifespan of Vulcan ants was short, they replaced each other extremely quickly. Therefore, they were able to rapidly form differences in a short amount of time. This was simply a large-scale laboratory for genetic mutation. The branches of this laboratory in the wilderness had their own areas of activity. They were very territorial, and sometimes they would even kill each other. But they all had the same origin. They all belonged to one, the mutant nest. There was a direct relationship of subordination between the headquarters and the branches. Now that headquarters was in trouble, the entire branch had returned to assist. Luonan only had a few short days of observation. He did not know what these Vulcan ants would do when they gathered together. But he didn't want to add more variables to his plan, so he controlled Number One to speed up. The frequency of lightning flashing clearly increased within the blood cloud that pervaded the crevice. A series of crackling explosions rang out. Number One's forward speed had already increased by 3 times, and the strength of the electromagnetic shield had increased correspondingly. This was to defend against the underground guardian that could come out at any time. The electromagnetic shield was an advanced technology that had yet to be realized by Earth's technology. It was formed from the integration of the seed imprint that was implanted into the combat machinery. Thus, a powerful electromagnetic field domain was formed with electromagnetic vanguard as the fulcrum. The domain pervaded the surroundings, and it could be retracted and released at will. This was the embryonic form of Jintang's extraordinary domain. Being able to realize this kind of effect proved that the potential of the seed imprint had been excavated to a new level. And under this stimulation, the corresponding information within the divine binding hoop and the virtual brain system was activated one after another. They provided Luonan with even more detailed and thorough application technology. Of course, the carriers of these application technologies were all indecipherable hieroglyphs. Luonan relied on the even more marvelous I-word to decipher a portion of the hieroglyphs with great difficulty. The divine binding hoop was the sole spoil of war from killing Jintang. Presumably, it had caused quite a bit of trouble for its previous owner. It had to be said that Jintang was truly a genius for being able to break into the extraordinary realm under these circumstances. High-level techniques required high-level consumption. 2,000 kilometers away in the underground laboratory of Gear, Luonan regulated his breathing in the simulation chamber to adapt to the ever-increasing pressure. Currently, the internal energy and transmission system of the electromagnetic Vanguard 1 had already retreated to a secondary position in the driving force. The main source of power came from the remote interference of Luonan's soul strength. Just the electromagnetic shield alone consumed an astronomical amount of energy. In addition, there was also the natural consumption of long-range interference. Even with Luonan's soul strength reserves, it was still quite strenuous. Fortunately, strands of marvelous energy seeped over from the depths of the void as Luonan approached the core region. The energy grew clearer and stronger. Good. Very good. Luonan let out a sigh of relief. This supplement was nothing compared to the overall consumption, but it was an extremely positive feedback. There was no energy in this world that was like water without a source or a tree without roots. There was bound to be a source and a process of transformation. Luonan was fully aware of the entire process. His heart was all the more certain and excited. Number 1's speed increased once more. Not only was it advancing towards its predetermined target, it was also tracing back to the source of the energy transformation. After advancing another 10 kilometers or so, Number 1 had already swapped out 2 passageways in the ground. One of these passageways was a shortcut that had just been created due to the earthquake. It was precisely because of this timely change that it was able to evade the even crazier attacks and interception of the Guardians. Even so, Number 1's left arm was scorched and deformed by a tyrannical mutant that could transform into lava. A large chunk of the armor on its chest was lifted off, exposing the deformed components within. As for the narrow passageway behind it, a layer of burnt ashes had already filled the entire passageway. The ashes slowly rolled along with the flowing lava. Right now, there was a vertical distance of at least 90 meters between Number 1 and the surface of the earth. The roars of the mutants had disappeared, but the violent upheaval of the earth brought about by the volcano and the earthquake still filled this passageway with noise. In the end, it formed muddy rumbling vibrations. Luonan handed over the task of analyzing the ambient sounds to the auxiliary computing system. This was to avoid the topographical changes that could cause destructive damage. As for himself, his attention was completely penetrated into the depths of the surrounding dark void. He probed the abyss region. There, a weak incantation was spiraling and circulating. It continued on without end. This was the music that surged as the energy turbulence of the abyss region passed through the special structural form. As the output gradually stabilized, the incantation grew clearer and clearer. It grew louder and louder. In the end, it was simply like a majestic and even fanatical chorus. Blood, blood, blood. Fire, fire, fire. Chapter 599. Number 1 took 2 more steps forward and suddenly froze. Boom! Flames smashed through the rock wall in front of him, bringing with it a destructive wave of lava heat. In the sudden change of extreme environment, Number 1's perception and computing functions were thrown into chaos for a moment. The metal body was somewhat stiff and out of control, but Luonan's mental senses weren't affected. Instead, they followed the fulcrum that was already stationed in this area and spread out. Then Luonan saw the spire-like building topple over on the other side of the collapsed rock wall. It crashed into the roaring and boiling lava, extinguishing in the blink of an eye. It wasn't strange for there to be such a building in the underground lava area. In fact, Number 1's body had adapted to the extreme environment. It braved the tide-like lava waves and walked to the edge of the collapsed rock wall. Here, the enormous cavern in front of it, as well as the twisted demonic building community within the cavern, only presented a corner of the volcano to Number 1. There were at least 10 enormous sealed structures scattered randomly in this enormous cavern with the lava as its base color. They were all made of rock and mud. They were of different sizes and were rather crude. They were connected to each other and to the rock walls of the surrounding mountain by pipes made of the same material. They crisscrossed and crisscrossed. One could see that they were building structures with clear functions at a glance. Perhaps it was the reflection of the lava's radiance, or perhaps it was the material or other factors, but these sealed structures radiated a dark red glow. They seemed to be burning at all times, like enormous torches. They were very eye-catching. The dark red glow that radiated appeared to be flowing without end upon closer inspection. It was like the blood circulation system of an aberration. It didn't stop for a moment. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the temperature was like fire in this volcanic lava environment. But there were tens of millions of fire god ants in this inferno-like building community. They were following the internal and external passageways, shuttling back and forth at high speed. Luonan's mental senses were able to detect that the dozen or so sealed structures exposed above the lava were nearly filled to the brim with fire god ants. More and more ants were advancing, one after the other, to the far end of the rock wall. They were even advancing deeper into the depths of the lava. That's right. Similar sealed structures and passageways existed widely in other locations of the mountain and the Earth's crust, beneath the unfathomable depths of the high-temperature lava. They were the ant rooms and ant tunnels built by this enormous colony of fire god ants. All of these structures together formed the entirety of the aberration nest. And this was only the lower part of the aberration nest. According to Luonan's probing observations over the past few days, this aberration nest included at least 200 ant rooms and 10 times the number of ant tunnels. There was no obvious pattern to their distribution. Some places were denser, while others were thinner. Overall, they still formed the shape of an inverted pyramid. About a fifth of the lower portion was completely submerged in magma, and that was Luonan's final destination. The heart of the entire aberration nest, the queen of the fire god ants. It was also the core of the collective consciousness of the entire fire god ant society. The tremors of the mountain and the ground continued. Number 1 stood at the edge of the cliff for 3 to 5 seconds before another ant chamber was peeled off from the cliff. Together with tens of thousands of fire god ants, it fell heavily into the lava. Most ant chambers were connected to the surrounding mountains and strata. The volcanic activity in this area had probably been too intense, resulting in the collapse of the strata that supported it, exposing the ant chambers inside. From this, it could be seen that the ant chambers of the fire god ants were much sturdier than the surrounding rock strata. But these peculiar creations had lost their supporting foundation, and it was very difficult for them to maintain themselves in this vile environment for long periods of time. Such destructive tremors had the effects of natural disasters like volcanoes and earthquakes. There was also the forceful interference of the energy turbulence in the abyss region on the material plane, adding fuel to the flames. There was also the more direct impact from the depths of the lava. Right now, the lava below was surging with waves. There was no pattern to them at all. It was as if a dozen enormous monsters were fighting and struggling within. So much so that the rock walls below continued to crumble and fall, chiseling larger and larger holes. Under these circumstances, it was very difficult for Number 1's auxiliary computing system to accurately monitor and judge the surrounding environment. It was as good as crippled. If it's crippled, then it's crippled. Number 1 had already completed its basic mission by being able to advance to this area. Luonan couldn't count on it to play any role in the future. Luonan soon made a decision. He controlled Number 1 to slide down along the rock wall. He used the most direct method to approach the critical area. The crumbling strata presented a very bad concave shape. There were practically no places for Luonan to borrow strength from. And in this extreme environment, Number 1's not-so-passable basic design exposed problems. Its external rocket propulsion system was intermittent. It simply relied on the electromagnetic shield to roll down like a rubber ball. As for braking and so on, Luonan had to rely on the help of the alloy combat knife. Such a sorry state completely obliterated the valiant appearance of No. 1 from its sharp knife charge in the previous few hours. Luonan couldn't care less. He controlled Number 1 to slide down another 40 meters or so. The surrounding air was becoming even more viscous. Enormous noises. Noises that originated from the two directions of the material plane, and the abyss region's void had already blasted and kneaded together. They radiated a tyrannical psychic pressure that was distorted and chaotic. An invisible whirlpool of turbulence swept up within the Inferno prison. Right now, Luonan could clearly feel the collision and conflict of the two forces within. On one side was the great chorus of blood, 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 fire, fire, fire. It appeared to be fanatical, but in fact, it occupied the dominant position within the abyss region's void. Its energy circulation was extremely strange and miraculous. On the other side was the enormous heat source entrenched in the volcanic strata here. It was in a relatively rough and wild mode of operation, charging back and forth. Although a huge amount of energy was wasted at every moment, in this environment, it was almost as if it was replenished at any time, inexhaustible and inexhaustible. Emoluan did well. The fire god ants. They really did make the right choice. The conductor of the great chorus was undoubtedly Emoluan. This puppet that resided within the Bloodsoul Temple only had that tyrannical combat instinct left. Even now he was still able to bring out such a remarkable method of circulation. Even with the powerful enhancement of the Bloodsoul Temple, he was worthy of being an expert that was only a step away from transcendence. As for the leading force of the enormous heat source, it was naturally the fire god ant colony. The fire god ant colony's consciousness was quite disciplined. Combined with the enormous ant nest structure that covered the volcanic region, they formed a complete energy circulation and utilization system within an area of nearly 1,000 square kilometers. Even though there were various inefficiencies within, and they were unavoidably restricted by the natural environment, they still possessed inconceivable power due to their enormous base. If they were to contend against the fire god ant head-on, all of the transcendence on Earth, be it physical or mental, would be crushed by the fire god ant. Then there would be nothing for Luonan to do, and there would be no plans. All he had to do was pat his ass and get the hell out of here. But today's facts proved that even if one had an overwhelming advantage in strength, one might not necessarily be able to gain the upper hand without the corresponding high-end circulation technique. One might even be able to be used by others. Otherwise, where would the energy Luonan was using to replenish himself come from? Right now, Emoluan seemed to be piloting a floating power generation platform. He was drifting on the vast ocean. The enormous waves that reached the heavens didn't topple this platform. Instead, they provided powerful tidal energy, helping the platform complete a series of energy transformations. Right now, this transformation mode was still a rootless duckweed, but Luonan believed that it wouldn't be long before there would be a huge change. The progress of the forced infusion transformation is okay. It's just that I'm a bit uncertain when I put the seed in. It really won't do. I'll ask Ruewen to help. Has she finished her class yet? While Luonan was distracted, a heat wave of lava that was several dozen meters tall suddenly surged within the enormous void. It nearly filled the entire void in an instant, swallowing number one whole. The electromagnetic shield was raised to the highest level in an instant. This was the instantaneous limit of Luonan's soul strength when it came to interfering with the material plane. Even the depths of the layers of dark red lava had blue-white lightning tenaciously leaping about. It held on for at least 2 seconds, but in the end it was scattered and shattered. Luonan knew that the instantaneous influx of energy had caused quite a bit of damage to the combat machine. But this was already meaningless. This was because the surging wave of lava had smashed the combat machine into pieces. The faint sounds of the body fragments exploding were drowned out by the enormous background noise of the void. There was no value in saving it. Such a tyrannical attack was the result of the seething evil thoughts of the fire god ant colony. But this wasn't necessarily directed at number one. According to Emoluan's feedback, this was more like a venting action of the colony after repeated failed attacks. Luonan could see that more than half of the dozen ant chambers within the enormous void had collapsed due to the attack just now. This part of the blood circulation system, which could be considered complete, had a large area of necrosis in the blink of an eye, harming others and harming oneself. It was nothing more than this. TSK. How violent. Luckily, I specially chose a high melting point tantalum alloy. I also did some heat insulation. Number one's head module was still considered complete, as well as half of its chest and shoulder armor. This was the largest wreckage that Luonan's electromagnetic shield could protect. Its body functions had already been completely lost. Its only function now was to protect the metal core in the high-temperature lava, so that it wouldn't be quickly destroyed. Currently, the wreckage of number one's body had completely lost its ability to move. It was slowly sinking in the lava. In the extreme environment of the lava, the interaction between mind and matter was severely limited. Forcefully obtaining a driving force was not desirable, and this was not a good opportunity. So it could only be a mechanical beauty that quietly watched from the sidelines for now. Chapter 600. Wreckage number 1 continued to sink closer and closer to the heart, at the bottom of the lava. It was also the lowest level of the Vulcan ant nest, the area where the Ant Queen resided. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but the core area of the Vulcan ant nest really did look like an enormous heart. Most of its structure was embedded into the ground. It was completely exposed to the lava, and was approximately 20 meters tall. It was undulating due to the intense activity of the ground. It really was like the swelling and contracting of a living heart. Moreover, there were 6 thick pipes connected to the top. Dark red blood was constantly pouring in and circulating. Although the color of this blood was similar to the lava, it was not to the extent of being confused. This was because the luster of the active flow was hard to be completely concealed, even by the layers of lava. Luonan was still thinking about the lava attack that had smashed wreckage number 1 into pieces. The mental sensor network that pervaded the lava focused slightly under his command. It swept from the heart to the inside and outside of the continuously sinking ant room structure. Liquid lava can achieve hammering. This shows that it has a set of controls. But it doesn't seem like it can already carry out consciousness interference with the surrounding environment. There should be a medium. Not only can the Vulcan ant control a living body, it can even control lava. The operating mechanism here seems a bit familiar. Such a marvelous operating mode clearly did not appear in normal data. Luonan soon had an idea. It's in the user's manual. It seems to have been mentioned in the material chapter. Huh? The underground lava trembled once more. At first Luonan believed that this was another vent of the Vulcan ants' collective consciousness. But he soon confirmed that this unforeseen event was not led by the Vulcan ants' consciousness, but it was inextricably linked to it. Within the twisting vortex of the void of the abyss region, and the inferno of lava, a structure of special significance was soaked in the residual energy that overflowed from both sides. It silently molded and grew. It had already taken shape. It broke through the already somewhat weak ground layer with a single tremor. It stuck close to the heart of the Vulcan ant nest, withstood the boiling lava, and rose up. It was a thick and short stone pillar. Even if it stuck its head out, it would only be a meter tall in the end. It was practically insignificant next to the enormous Vulcan ant nest that occupied the entire mountain, and several hundred meters of the ground layer. It was like a speck on a person's body. It could be ignored in a matter of seconds. But just as the stone pillar was pulled out, the turbulent vortex that was twisting in the void, causing it to coil and accumulate sediment, suddenly came to a stop. Luonan had yet to come to a conclusion as to what sort of stimulative changes occurred to the collective consciousness of the fire god ants in this instant. But from Luonan's perspective, Luonan felt that Mo Luan was at the helm. The floating power-generating platform drifted up and down within the enormous waves that reached the heavens. Suddenly, an enormous anchor was fiercely stabbed into it. The end of the anchor hit the bottom of the ocean. Although it was shaking violently and even bringing an even more intense blast to the floating platform, it was still deeply embedded into the soil and anchored to the hard seabed. This was not all. At this moment on the platform, another heavy and sturdy pile fell, directly wedged into the depths of the turbulent vortex. 1 pile, 2 piles, 3 piles, 4 piles at the heart of the Vulcan ant nest. The thick and short stone pillars were pulled up one by one, just like the piles that had fallen. Some of the piles had just probed down when they were wrapped in lava by the berserk consciousness of the fire god ants, smashing them to pieces. But there were also some piles that were either deep or shallow, fixed in place. Then they were pulled up, smashed, wedged in, and smashed again. It was hard to say which one was more tenacious, like this over and over again. But in any case, the floating platform never broke away from the storm vortex. Instead, it was fixed within this domain, forming a deadlock. This was also the most terrifying phase of energy consumption. No matter how marvelous Mo Luan's combat consciousness was, he was just a B-rank puppet. There was a limit to his own energy reserves. It was impossible for him to directly contend against the fire god ants, who occupied the terrain advantage. Therefore, he could only rely on his master, Luonan's closed system. This was, without a doubt, a collision between the two systems. After the first wave, Luonan was already very strained. In a certain sense, Luonan's soul strength reserves were already the best in the world. This was not only because of the enormous output of his closed system's large production line. It was also because he could ignore the carrying capacity of his fleshly body. He could use the form of the soul cloak to extend and store energy nearly limitlessly. Luo Nan's current soul cloak could cover the entire world. In addition to the combined reserves of the boundless cloud world, Luo Nan's stamina was so long that he could practically suppress all the cultivators of the world. Perhaps only the leaders of the three great secret orders could rely on their enormous numbers of believers to contend against him. The only thing that could limit Luo Nan was the carrying capacity of his fleshly body. Though he possessed the boundless ocean, his body's capacity was limited in the end. Even if he were to be sucked dry in an instant, it would be nothing more than the storage capacity of a lake. Not to mention the vibrations and impacts of doing so, just the transformation within was destined to lead to one fault after another. This was extremely dangerous in the tight deadlock process. If the opponent was a genuine extraordinary, Luo Nan's life would be pretty much handed over when the first fault appeared. The collective consciousness of the Vulcan ant was not this sharp. It was unable to sense Luo Nan's flaws. But even so, Luo Nan, who was in the simulator, was like a twisted towel under the frantic and irascible impact of the wrestling. The muscles, tendons, bones, and flesh of his entire body seemed to be about to be squeezed out of it. If this situation were to continue, Luo Nan would have done his utmost to dig a peerless sinkhole for himself. He could absolutely contend for the top 3 spot on the list of the stupidest people in the 50 years of history of the inner world. Fortunately, this enemy of his did not develop to a qualified and perfect degree, even though it had gathered millions of individuals into a group consciousness. Not only did it not discover the problem that Luo Nan exposed, it even poked an even bigger hole. The group consciousness of the Vulcan ant did not know how to properly utilize its own strength. It also did not understand that this kind of strength would inevitably harm others, and itself once it exceeded a certain limit. If it were Luo Nan, he would absolutely not forcefully break through this limit when the instantaneous consumption of soul strength exceeded the limits of what his body could bear under normal circumstances. He would exchange endless future troubles for temporary pleasure. The Vulcan ant did not have this kind of awareness. In its simple mind, using its innate talent to drive the enemy was obviously the most important option. But at this stage, when faced with Mo Luan, who was like a mist of nothingness, and number 1, who had already turned into a pile of mechanical wreckage, the so-called drive ability was of no use. So it could only settle for the next best thing. It used its incomplete sight ability to knock down the enemy. It must be said that the upper limit of the Vulcan ant's sight ability was extremely high in the environment of the volcanic region. There would practically never be a situation where it was lacking in strength. Under these circumstances, its train of thought was even simpler. If it did not knock down the enemy, then it would need to increase its strength once more until the enemy was smashed into smithereens. With the foundation of reality, this kind of train of thought could not be wrong. But it did not consider one thing. Who would be the first to be destroyed in such a big fight in its own nest? In any case, it won't be me. Luo Nan grimaced in pain. He used the Doing technique given to him by the gym bishop to relax his muscles and bones, to reduce the damage. At the same time, he was able to capture the turning point of this confrontation within this stalemate. He did not need to wait for the Vulcan ant to smash his nest into smithereens. He only needed to keep an eye on this one-track-minded group consciousness. The instant the two instincts of killing the enemy and self-preservation intersected, creating an even deeper level of chaos. The turning point arrived much faster than Luo Nan imagined. But it happened after all the ant chambers in the enormous cavity above the lava had completely collapsed. The Vulcan ants that fell into the lava were not immediately finished. But every ant chamber and every connecting pipe was the foundation of the Vulcan ant colony. They were an important construction foundation and source of energy for the group consciousness. When large areas of necrosis appeared endlessly and continued to spread, a blockage appeared in the originally complete energy cycle. In the end, hesitation and chaos appeared in this single strand of group consciousness. It was at this moment that the true great enemy, who had crossed realms and hidden here from another time and space, revealed its fangs to the Vulcan ant colony. The instant of hesitation and chaos expanded into a destructive storm in the blink of an eye. The wraith sign exploded from above the polar domain like a bomb filled with poison. It smashed into the structure of the group consciousness that the Vulcan ant colony had formed with great difficulty. Luo Nan knew better than the vast majority of people in this world just how strict the requirements of a structure were for a group consciousness that had a clear direction. The group consciousness of the Vulcan ant society was able to become neutral from the chaotic and illusory mental turbid flow with great difficulty. A small portion of it probed into the abyssal region and was able to integrate its power from a higher level. But because of the wraith sign's deadly bombardment, the structure collapsed and the foundation was corroded. This caused the edifice of group consciousness, which originally possessed a certain order, to collapse and fall apart in an instant. It must be said that as long as there was a nest and a strict social structure of the Vulcan ant, it was not difficult to reconstruct the group consciousness. Since the beginning of time, the Vulcan ant colony in the volcanic area had been penetrated 5 times by powerful people from all walks of life. Each time, it was a great crisis that nearly overturned the entire colony. Even the queen ant was captured. The most recent time was 6 or 7 years ago, and this didn't include the aftermath of the world-shaking battle with priceless gold. But within these short few years, the Vulcan ant colony had developed to its current scale. They were still the number 1 or 2 hegemons of this volcanic area. The tenacity of the Vulcan ant colony was worthy of admiration. But the problem was that the wraith sign was the poison bomb that had instantly destroyed the core structure of the Vulcan ant society. This darksider species was currently using its inconceivable talent to pour its toxic spores into the ruins of the core structure. The spores began to proliferate rapidly. The Vulcan ant began by controlling other living creatures. And this time, they had encountered a true expert in this field. Chapter 601. The opportunity came earlier than expected. After the wraith sign blew up the structure of the group consciousness of the Vulcan ants, it naturally activated the corresponding mechanisms to stop damage and repair. As mentioned before, as long as the Vulcan ant aberration nest was present, the material foundation and structure were present, it was not difficult to reconstruct the group consciousness. The Vulcan ant society had used 5 or 6 successful examples to prove this point. According to the relevant information from research on the Vulcan ants, when the Vulcan ant society suffered a fatal attack, usually when the queen was killed or captured, or when the aberration nest was severely damaged, causing the group consciousness to collapse and the ants to be leaderless, this highly social aberration colony would activate its extreme survival mode. They would use the relatively intact area as an axis on the wreckage of the nest to combine the ant chambers and ant tunnels that could be linked together. They would radiate the relevant pheromones to gather the greatest number of defeated soldiers. After gathering to a certain scale, they would use a special aberration path to stimulate and nurture a temporary queen ant. They would reconstruct the group consciousness in a short amount of time. With this as the foundation, they would rapidly replace each other and regroup. If there was no area of this scale, a single ant chamber could complete this task. It was just that the group consciousness produced would be of an extremely low level. The various ant chambers would gradually integrate and slowly converge. However, this would be accompanied by conflict and slaughter. It would inevitably end with the death of the temporary queen ant of the losing side. The process would be extremely tragic. It was this extreme survival mode, and its matching ability to rapidly replace each other, that helped the Vulcan ant society to tenaciously survive in this volcanic region for several decades. But it was also because such a pattern had appeared too early in today's special circumstances. The wraith sign's poison bomb struck from above, crushing the group consciousness of the Vulcan ant society from the mental plane. This attack didn't cause much damage to the Vulcan ant nest, but it sent the hypertoxic spores into every corner of the Vulcan ant society. Luo Nan still did not understand the wraith sign's keen and brutal instincts. He did not know how it was constructed, but every time this fellow hunted, it would accurately tear apart the vital parts of the target. This time was no exception. The hypertoxic spores did not possess any direct destructive power, but when they spread out, the fire god ants that were moving through the various ant rooms and ant tunnels suddenly fell into chaos in their neat and orderly formation. It was as if they had lost their sense of direction. The The front and back of the formation were disjointed. Some of them accelerated forward while others turned back. Some of them even clashed together, interfering with each other as they circled in confusion. Interference pheromone. Luonan roughly guessed an answer. Ants and the like were social insects. Their behavior patterns were largely guided by pheromones. Though the Vulcan ant was a mutant species, it still retained a few similar patterns. Due to the Vulcan ants receiving erratic information, the large circulation system with the heart of the nest as the center was already in disorder. However, upon closer inspection, there were some general patterns that could be followed. Millions and tens of millions of fire god ants were clearly gathering towards the nearest ant room. Every ant chamber was a center, and there were no exceptions. Thus, in a short span of a dozen seconds, the aberrated nest had hundreds and thousands of centers. They had even begun to cut off the circulation channels and retract the flowing energy, entering a de facto state of separation. This is really hee-hee. For the fire god ants that had been torn apart, no, they had not done anything wrong. The instincts engraved in their genes were displaying their effects. After the leading group consciousness collapsed, they quickly entered an extreme survival mode. The environment they felt and the stimuli they received indicated that the overall structure of the aberrated nest no longer existed. They had to use the remaining ant chambers as the center to gather the greatest amount of power and reconstruct the group consciousness. Then they would be constantly replaced and walk the path of expansion once more. So they did this, and they did it quite well. The crisis pheromone formed after the ant assembly was violently volatile. It was injected into the ant chambers through a special method, erasing the suppressive pheromone from when the Vulcan ant queen was alive. This caused a portion of the worker ants inside to undergo aberrations. At the same time, they killed each other. The final victor became the temporary queen ant. They erected a rough new framework and began to construct a low-level group consciousness. During this period of time, the Vulcan ant nest had the beauty of a single spark setting a prairie ablaze. Within Luonan's mental sensing network, there were weak soul flames lighting up one after another. From a few, to a few dozen, to over 100. They quickly formed a scale. The amount of resources that the Vulcan ants could utilize in the environment of the volcanic area should not be doubted. Although these low-level group consciousnesses were far from being as powerful as the previous one, the imprint engraved in their genes still gave them the natural ability to absorb external heat and life energy. According to normal survival mode, these low-level group consciousnesses would have a period of solitude to further familiarize themselves with and apply this ability. When they began to expand once more, they should be experts in this field. They would capture thousands upon thousands of living creatures of other races during the expansion process. They would serve as food and slaves. Then they would rely on the advantage of expansion to defeat their own species that no longer belonged to the same aberrated evolutionary path. They would unify the volcanic area once more, and let their genes follow an even stronger path of development and inheritance. But there was a problem. At this stage, every ant chamber was very close to each other. They were close to each other to the point where they would be face to face the moment they stepped out of the door. According to the genetic instincts of the Vulcan ants, they did not have any kinship or brotherly respect when faced with this kind of situation. The only choice was fight. The internal war of the Vulcan ants erupted 15 seconds after the formation of the first low-level group consciousnesses. They entered into an all-out war mode 5 minutes later. For a time, the entire core area of the Vulcan ant nest was filled with the flames of war, and the effects of the collapse of the original group consciousnesses were still continuing to spread. If there was a problem at the headquarters, then the branch divisions would not have an easy time. It was unknown when the unrest in the entire volcanic area would come to an end. Speaking of which, the entire Vulcan ant society had suddenly entered the spring and autumn warring states period mode. It wasn't that no one wanted to do their best to save it. Originally, the only core of the aberrated nest was located in the heart, beneath the lava. The highest ruler of the entire Vulcan ant society, or perhaps a queen, had to be added. Well, in short, the true Vulcan ant queen was extremely angry and irritable at this moment. The Vulcan ant queen was probably a mutant among mutants. It had an extremely deformed body. The front half of its body was only 4 or 5 centimeters long. It was around 5 times the size of a normal Vulcan ant. But below its abdomen, it was rapidly expanding in an unimaginable manner. Its diameter alone was 10 centimeters, about the width of an adult's clenched fist. As for its length, it was about the length of an entire arm behind it. This structure was a little similar to the termite queen. Many researchers suspected that the original species before the mutation was a termite. But no termite queen would have this kind of mass and strength. The completely unbalanced body proportions made it look more like a super large eggplant with a handle. At this moment, this eggplant was squirming slightly. A dirty light like pus and blood filled the entire space of the heart. It reflected the countless fertilized eggs and non-fertilized eggs piled neatly on the 4 walls, as well as the rather neat ranks of worker ants and soldier ants. Even further out, there were layers of blood-red fluff spread out, like layers upon layers of terraced crops, neatly arranged. It became an inseparable part of the internal structure of the heart. At this moment, the Vulcan ant queen had just recovered from the shock of losing control of her kingdom. In the entire Vulcan ant society, the Vulcan ant queen was definitely the one closest to possessing a complete individual consciousness. In fact, it was the core of the Vulcan ant's collective consciousness. This was its most important function in this colony other than reproduction. It could be said that the collective consciousness of the entire Vulcan ant society was determined by the mutation talent and growth of the queen. This queen was still very young. It had only been about 2 years since she became the ruler of this kingdom. This caused it to be far from developing a mature consciousness system, making it even harder for it to make accurate and clear judgments. This limitation caused the collapse of the collective consciousness of the Vulcan ant when the two systems collided. It also caused it to be unable to analyze the crux of the problem after losing control of the kingdom. Instead, it was quickly driven by an even more stubborn instinct. The great enemy that descended from the sky was thrown to the back of its mind. What it needed to do now was to consolidate its resources and strength, using a more advantageous structure among a bunch of low-level consciousnesses, to reclaim its kingdom and become the ruler of this world once again. In the spring and autumn warring states period, it undoubtedly had an overwhelming advantage. But the current scenario was alien invasion. The former queen and the future overlord were not given any chances. A bloody beam of light tore through the barrier between the mental and material planes, directly piercing into the heart region. This was an artillery attack from the direction of the polar domain. Ever since Luo Nam was tossed around by the dimensional crossbow, he had taken a liking to this sort of tyrannical and fierce offensive method that came from the polar domain. Right now, he no longer had the tyrannical collective consciousness of the Vulcan ants. There was Mo Luan in the void of the abyssal region. There was the seed imprint in the depths of the lava. The Wraith sign itself had long since transcended space and boundaries. All kinds of interference had disappeared, and there were 2 positions of reference at the same time. There was absolutely no reason for the attack to miss the mark. The bloody beam of light silently drowned the area where the Vulcan ant queen was. A similar hue flooded the entire ant room. At this moment, inside the heart, countless zygotes and unzygotes, the dense troop of soldier ants, and the eggplant queen, which was supposed to be the toughest, were all twisted and destroyed in the intense ripples of light. Chapter 602. In this era, the night in any city was no different. The only thing that could be distinguished was the food habits accumulated over a long period of time. After moving from Xia City to Tea City for 2 months, Inla still hadn't gotten used to the completely different tastes. She returned to Xia City this time. The food she had grown accustomed to in her early years gave her a unique feeling when it collided with her taste buds. But tonight Inla didn't eat. This was a habit she had developed with Mrs. Halder. Lady Halder had maintained this habit for more than 10 years. The last time she had a meal was before she had beheaded her husband. But Frau Halder did not mind a glass of red wine before bed. Thus Inla pushed the dining cart and knocked on Mrs. Halder's door. Mrs. Halder had just finished her bath and was sitting on a round armchair by the window. Her bathrobe covered her pale skin, revealing only her calves and bare feet. The most conspicuous thing was that on her right cheek, there was a long and slender bloodstain that had a strange curvature. At this moment, it was emitting a dark red light. This was not a description. This bloodstain was proof that she had passed the ultimate test of the blood flame will. In itself, it had a rather mystical effect. Boss. Inlu used the old way of addressing Mrs. Halder. Then, just like when she was a secretary back then, she poured the red wine into a glass and let Mrs. Halder take it. Lady Halder picked up the thin stem of the glass and raised it to her eyes, staring at the red wine swirling within. At this moment, Lady Halder was like a melancholy and lonely lady, although her heart was surging with iron and fire. Inla sat to the side, wondering if she should start a conversation. At this moment, Lady Halder took the initiative to speak, her voice low. Our investor refused to meet. Inla didn't find it strange at all. She had guessed it when she left Xia City last time. However, she had always been curious as to who the investor that Lady Halder had mentioned was. This wasn't some inconceivable person who had taught Madame Halder the secret art of herding the Darksider species in order to reconstruct the sacrificial artifact. In the entirety of Xia City, there were only a handful of people who had the qualifications to do this. Even if it wasn't limited to Xia City, how many more people could there be? Lady Halder swirled the wine, her eyes unfocused. Is it to prevent losses, or are they happy to see it happen? That is the question. Right now, Madame Halder seemed to be in low spirits. The more it was like this, the harder it was for Inla to speak. She stared at the cup in her hand in a daze. Fortunately, this atmosphere didn't last for too long. Very quickly, Lady Halder's voice regained its usual calmness and decisiveness. The investment is only an external force. The wavering of the church's foundation is what's fatal. You are now the only deputy officiator, so you must focus your efforts on the ritual. Although Ren Hong is a rebel, he is better at this than you are. Even Ren Hong, that dead man, was compared. Inlu naturally understood their attitude and replied solemnly, I will remember. Lady Halder cut to the chase. What about the target? The target has entered the abyss area again, but there won't be any offensive and defensive drills tonight or for the next 2 or 3 days. I heard that teacher Luo is in seclusion. Luonan isn't here. He's basically just looking at the scenery in the abyssal region. But who can say that in a few months, a few weeks, or even a few days, there won't be new functions? Indeed. Inlu added before she hesitated briefly before she asked, Boss, the blood will ring in us, I mean. Inlu didn't continue. Lady Halder looked at her former secretary through her wine glass. The sparkling and translucent walls of the glass caused the two's faces to clearly distort. As the glass spun, it transformed into all sorts of strange shapes. Communication between people was often like this. It was precisely because they knew that people were all the more cautious. Lady Halder understood Inli's thoughts. She also understood her apprehensions. At this time, it was the superior who spoke the truth. This represented honesty and trust, so she hooked the corner of her lips. You want to ask if the structure of the blood will ring and the fundamental ritual of the order, the Blood Soul Temple, belong to the same category? Let's put it this way. The word configuration that Luonan spoke of can be used to generalize the blood will ring and the Blood Soul Temple. From an academic perspective, they should both belong to the same class of configuration. Inlu let out a secret sigh of relief and hurriedly responded, That's why we monitor the corresponding target for reference. Lady Halder interrupted her words. But before the 14th, I once believed that the solidification of configurations in the abyssal region belonged only to extraordinaries and the order. Inli's expression darkened slightly. Before the 14th, there weren't many ability users in this world who could enter the attack and defense of the abyssal region, but there were still quite a few. Mental side users of B rank and above had several years of research, and they should have no problem doing so. However, the average B rank mental side user would only be able to stay in the abyssal region for a few seconds to a few minutes before they would be struck down by the turbulent flow of energy. There were a few who were more powerful, and they could temporarily forge special structures to turn resistance into power. They could seize a short opportunity to attack and kill. Only those who reached the level of extraordinaries, especially the mental side extraordinaries, could solidify this structure, the configuration that Luonan spoke of, within the energy flow of the abyssal region. It was like a car or a boat, like a house or a city. It could truly utilize and control the inexhaustible energy of the abyssal region. It could be adjusted and modified a step further, gradually increasing its power. Aside from extraordinaries, the only ones who could accomplish this before the 14th were the various orders, the ones who could transform the hearts of the people into their own. Actually, not everyone in the various secret orders had this ability. They had to have extraordinaries overseeing the abyssal region in the early years. They were able to solidify the configuration of the abyssal region, then transform it into a foundation. They were able to link their believers' desires, beliefs, and so on. Then they used this to divide the level of authority, allowing one person's technique to be used by 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 people. The origins and details of these techniques were the secrets of the various orders. Every orders had their own specialties and taboos, and they were hidden behind a dense fog of mystery. Only someone like Yin Lu, who was a core member of the upper echelons of the orders, who was part of the orders of ideals like the Bloodflame Order, was able to understand, learn, and understand its essence. Yin Lu originally believed that this would be the core secret and reliance that she would guard within her heart. But she never expected that the Blood Intent Ring would appear out of nowhere and bump into this highest domain. It even brought several hundred people to tour around. Up until now, no one had connected this matter with the fundamental rules of the various orders. But how long could this last? Both inside and outside were in turmoil. What could she do? Mrs. Halder saw through Yin Li's thoughts. She lowered her head slightly, indicating for Yin Lu to come over. Yin Lu was a bit startled, but she still got up and walked over to her former boss's side. At this distance, in this atmosphere, she subconsciously did what she did in the past. She curled up her body and bent her legs. She sat on the carpet and leaned against Mrs. Halder's knee. She was like an admiring child, but she was even more like an obedient kitten. Her choice was very correct. Chapter 603. Ever since she had become the vice officiant, Yin Lu had entered the Abyss region more than once, entering the Blood Soul Temple, towering amidst the chaotic turbulence. Every time, she felt as if she was riding a small boat out to sea, boarding a platform amidst a violent storm. The stability of the platform was naturally much greater than that of a small boat, giving her a great sense of security. However, the impact of the storm and turbulence was always present. Yin Lu felt that the Blood Soul Temple was a platform on the sea, but she had no idea what it looked like in the eyes of others. That was because in the Order's system, the Blood Soul Temple had countless sides. In the eyes of every believer, there were subtle similarities and differences, but they could never see the whole picture. As a priest, how could she not be the same? As the vice officiant, Yin Lu could understand the basic framework of the Blood Soul Temple and control a portion of the details. She used a secret technique to purify the believer's will, using it as a primer to mobilize the power of the Abyss region. This allowed her, with her C+ rank strength, to compete with B rank experts. The position of vice officiant had raised Yin Li's level, but she had always felt that this wasn't a good job. This was especially true after Runhong's rebellion. After she had taken over the Order's daily operations, she had to sort out and guide the willpower of thousands of believers every day for the past 2 months. Furthermore, due to the instability of the believer base during this period of time, there were all sorts of troubles and slip-ups. Even with Lady Halder taking care of it, it still took up most of her energy. Sometimes Yin Lu even thought, Runhong's rebellion. Could it be that he's tired of this matter? Lady Halder seemed to have the ability to see through people's minds. She communicated with her thoughts. Mastering the sacrificial method and managing the Blood Soul Temple have always been the most difficult tasks. You have foresight and decisiveness, and you also have the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. However, you lack the tenacity to put in the effort. These things aren't the most suitable for you. Yin Lu hurriedly expressed, I will definitely focus on my thoughts. Lady Halder disagreed. Such a personality isn't something that can be easily fixed. Not to mention you. Even I have had a hard time sorting through these past few years. Constantly immersed in this chaotic power of faith, it will only be more difficult to maintain one's own thoughts. Yinlu once again thought of Renhong. Madame Halder's thoughts seeped in like icy water, layer by layer. In the end, it's because of the lack of sacrificial artifacts. The sacrificial vessel can be manipulated, suppressed, and adjusted. At the same time, it is also a set of rules. Our various operations can be used as a reference to see if they are in line with the fundamental laws. I just don't know if we have led the church on the right path in the past few years. Boss. Madame Halder's thoughts continued unabated. Without the sacrificial artifact, we can only wait until every year's grand ceremony. But this year, Yinlu finally understood why Mrs. Halder's mood was so low. Because today, December 21st, was the day of the Bloodflame Order's establishment memorial ceremony. This time of the year was the busiest and most important time for the church. But this year, today, and tonight were undoubtedly the most chaotic and desolate. Since the officiator and deputy officiator were not present, Jiang Yuanjin could only take over the ceremony in D City. As for the ceremony in Xia City, they had spent half a year preparing for it, so they simply threw it aside. Yinlu once believed that Madame Halder would return to Xia City at this time to give an explanation to the believers of Xia City. She never imagined that she would die without a cause. She stayed within the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District. She could feel the will of the believers wither and waver. Yinlu wasn't even willing to understand it any further. She just wanted to clean up the mess tomorrow morning. Madame Halder clearly had a different way of thinking from Yinlu. She sent a strand of her thoughts straight to the lowest level, where the withering and wavering was the most intense. Yinlu was helpless. She could only follow. Soon, she arrived at the structure of the Blood Soul Temple, where the stone forest and magma lake were. Originally, this was the structural region where the believers' will was cleansed and purified. The powerful structure of the Blood Soul Temple condensed a powerful internal pressure to form a lake of magma. The muddy willpower of the believers continued to be tempered until it reached a certain degree. Only then could they go to a higher level. But now the internal force was loose. There was no heat. There was only restlessness and chaos. It was like a mosquito flying in disorder. The willpower of some devout believers even fell down. They were affected and gradually showed signs of stripping away. Faced with such a situation, Yinlu felt that idling around was a sin. She subconsciously took action to control it. Fortunately, the basic structure of the Blood Soul Temple was still stable. The first Ablatum had indeed left behind a stable foundation for the order. Madame Halder didn't move. She only watched Yinlu and asked, "Are we at the edge of the abyss now?" "No, boss, no." Yinlu might lack the willpower to do her best, but her foresight and judgment had always been praised. She didn't think that there was a problem with Madame Halder's will. She only saw the current situation as a test. As she dealt with the loss of the believer's faith, she solemnly replied, "It's just as you said." At the bottom of the abyss of fear and despair, the mighty Bloodflame will is watching us. The Bloodflame Order's teachings had always been extremely violent. On one hand, it made it very difficult for them to expand. On the other hand, it made it have a relatively solid core of believers. Moreover, the more adversity they faced, the more they were able to display their resolute nature of the teachings. Last time, when the Bloodflame Order was on the verge of collapse, it was precisely this extremely resolute nature that gave birth to Madame Halder. She used her husband's head to prolong the Order's life and rebirth. Now perhaps it was her turn. Bang, bang, bang. A strange sound suddenly came from a certain part of the bottom structure. Yinlu's heart skipped a beat. Her smooth control suddenly became sluggish. She didn't even have time to search for the source of the problem before the continuous bang, bang sound spread throughout the stone forest and magma lake area. In response to it, the turbulent storm outside suddenly became intense. The Blood Soul Temple, the platform on the sea, began to sway, causing one's mind to be in chaos. At this moment, the destructive storm of the abyss seemed like it could cut through at any time. In Yinlu's perception, the basic framework of the Blood Soul Temple was clearly distorted. It was on the verge of collapsing and breaking. Yinlu didn't know what to do, and Madame Halder didn't give her any instructions. Just like that, her consciousness stiffened as she spent a nightmarish period of time in the bang, bang, bang sound. When she came back to her senses, her consciousness had already returned to the plane of reality. It was most likely that Madame Halder had brought her back. The light in the room was warm and gentle, but Ainley's heart was filled with coldness. Her memories of the abyss were somewhat hazy, but she still remembered that the structure of the Blood Soul Temple had already undergone some kind of irreversible change after the continuous distortion. Ainley turned her head, wanting to ask what had just happened. When she turned her head, her cheek rubbed against Madame Halder's body. Because she was kneeling, she rubbed against a leg that was exposed outside the bathrobe. It was slender and tight, but it was so cold that it didn't have the warmth of a living person. Halder didn't seem to feel anything. He just expressionlessly raised his glass and drank the red wine. But Ainley clearly sensed a faint layer of blood mixed in the wine's fragrance. "Boss." Ainley was bewildered. She wanted to get up, but her head hurt slightly as Halder pressed down on it. Madame Halder looked down from above, her gaze cold and heavy. When she looked into Ainley's eyes, it was like an icy storm had blown, wreaking havoc in her heart. "Do you feel it?" "Ah. The sacrificial artifact, the Blood Soul Temple." "Boss." "Someone has made the sacrificial artifact, the Blood Soul Temple, and they're even modifying the framework." Ainley's eyes went wide. Bang! The empty wine glass shattered, and the shattered glass fragments scattered over Madame Halder's bathrobe and leg. Some of it even streaked across Ainley's cheek. But at this time, Ainley didn't even dare to blink. On Madame Halder's right cheek, there was a long and narrow bloodstain. It seemed as if blood was really going to flow out. Aside from that, her entire face was pale and transparent. There was a callous and crazy tension to it. She calmly gazed at the base of the glass. It was as if a new cup could grow out from the base at any time. Or perhaps it could grow into an unknown shape. The unknown was the greatest fear. The members of the Blood Flame Order never avoided fear. They firmly believed that the blood flame was hidden deep within fear, giving them strength. But when their foundation was controlled by someone else, would the blood flame still protect them? Half a minute later, Madame Halder spoke with a surprisingly calm tone. "Notify Multifaceted. In an hour, I want all the video data of Xia City's central train station and its surroundings on the 14th. The range can extend to 30 square kilometers. Also, no matter what method she uses, no matter what price she wants us to pay, I need an opportunity to directly make contact with Luonan. Alone without interference." Ainley was a bit stunned. Luonan. Madame Halder pursed her lips. Luonan. The first and vice-ablatums of the Blood Flame Order repeated the name Luonan back and forth. Several dozen kilometers away, in the 6th underground floor of Gear, Luonan clenched his fists within the simulation pod. "It's done." His main consciousness was still 2,000 kilometers away in the volcanic region. Just a minute ago, when the polar domain cannon had annihilated the Queen Ant, a solid foundation had been erected. These were the thick and short stone pillars that had popped out earlier. They rose up one by one and firmly wedged themselves into the heart of the mutated nest. In a short few dozen seconds, the thick and short stone pillars had formed a scale in the heart of the Vulcan ant nest. They towered like a forest. Together, they constructed a primitive and rough foundation of an altar, allowing the illusory Blood Soul Temple to break through the boundary between the mental and the material. It also tore apart the defensive fortress of the Vulcan ant society and forcefully colonized it. It was a formal struggle for control over this enormous energy cycle system. The interior of the Vulcan ant nest's heart had already been flooded by the light and shadow of the Blood Soul Temple. It was remodeled, and beneath it, within the area encircled by the stone forest, a depression of magma that was clearly denser than the surroundings appeared in its embryonic form. The boiling magma within was no longer something that was purely on the material plane. Instead, it was mixed with an even more astonishing amount of heat and gas. It was like a pot of boiling oil. It constantly splashed outwards, but it did not exceed the range of the stone forest's control. Chapter 604. For the Blood Soul Temple, the bottom layer of the stone forest lava lake was a methane pool that absorbed and transformed the impurities of the outside world. It was also the cornerstone of the entire configuration. When the cornerstone was set, the nature of the entire configuration system became clear. Luonan finally found a foundation on the material plane for this structure that drifted on the mental plane of nothingness. Luonan wasn't sure if the Blood Flame Order's method mentioned this step, but he saw a similar suggestion from the user manual of the virtual brain system. From Luonan's perspective, it went without saying which side was more important. There was also the coincidental ecological and geographical environment of this volcanic area. There was also the urgent need for resources for the next step of the plan. Only then was there an operation. It hadn't even been a week since the start of the operation. Aside from feeling a bit frustrated with the design of the battle machinery, the overall operation was quite smooth, especially the success of the current critical segment in one fell swoop. This made the impatience and hesitation in Luonan's heart vanish into thin air. He was in a good mood, but the fire god ant's mutated nest was already clogged and impassable. When the Blood Soul Temple's stone forest lava lake took shape, it was as if a deadly malignant tumor had grown within the fire god ant nest's energy circulation system. It continuously extracted the surrounding heat energy and the life energy of the fire god ant colony, transforming them into nutrients needed by the Blood Soul Temple. The efficiency of this transformation wasn't particularly high for the time being, because the Blood Soul Temple needed to adapt to the environment and constantly adjust. But it was still a level higher than the fire god ant's crude energy circulation instincts. In addition, the fire god ant colony had entered the warring states period. Each ant room was divided and fought to the death. The group consciousness had yet to be reconstructed, and the originally smooth energy circulation system had become particularly rigid. There was practically no effective way to fight for the stone forest lava lake. More importantly, the formation of the stone forest lava lake represented the foundation of the Blood Soul Temple's structure. In essence, it achieved isolation from the fire god ant nest. And since it didn't possess the aura of a living being, the group of fire god ants with low intelligence just assumed that it was a new structure formed from the compression and deformation of the volcano during an earthquake. Currently, the fire god ants used a single ant room as a base for internal strife. Their need for resources wasn't too urgent, so they didn't experience the problem of a single blocked node. At most, they weren't used to such an eyesore, but they didn't have any plans to attack, occupy, or transform it for the time being. They just let the stone forest lava lake suck their blood. This was the classic example of making a fortune in silence. Before the new fire god ant queen appears, there will most likely be peace for a period of time. This amount of time is still not enough. If the error in the calculation is not too big, I will need at least another 50 hours or so to complete the second and third levels, and have a certain offensive and defensive ability. If there's a design problem, we'll have to delay it. Luonan's relaxed mood was not maintained for long. He was pressuring himself right now, flipping through his notes in the simulation chamber. His brain was spinning a bit faster than when he had slaughtered his way in. Not only can I not be quiet during this period of time, I can't let the Vulcan ants in the other ant rooms be quiet either. Interference, destruction, and exhaustion. Not a single one can be left out. Oh, large-scale destruction is out of the question. Every resource is precious right now. TSK, why does it look like an RTS game? But RTS should not include the design of the base and building core. As he ridiculed himself, Luonan continued to overcome his terrible translation obstacles. He operated the virtual brain system, performing half-baked simulations and calculations on the Blood Soul Temple that was being constructed. The Blood Soul Temple was a kind of configuration. Though it was complex to the point of making one's eyes pop out, and many elements of witchcraft and mystic arts were mixed in, its various layers of structure were pieced together. Even the thought process that appeared within was a relatively typical configuration rule and thought process. Even if the level of each structure was uneven, there were countless dazzling flashes of brilliance, but there were also low-level mistakes that were unbearable to look at. Well, Luonan didn't have the qualifications to question the abilities of the first ablatum of the blood flame order from his experience in the inner world. But the virtual brain system and its user manual possessed the ability to research and judge. That is, if this wasn't an absurd scam set up by his old man. Luonan had already confirmed through this period of learning and understanding that the virtual brain system hidden within the external neuron's main function was to serve the creation of the dynamo core and the spirit core. It was more inclined towards practical manufacturing techniques. It didn't have much knowledge regarding configuration design. It was just like how a decorator might not be good at interior design. But the configuration examples within the user manual and the series of configuration design data stored within the virtual brain system were all the most typical, the most characteristic, and the most standard cases. Luonan used these cases as a reference to understand the most stringent criteria for judging configurations. What was a qualified configuration? How to discover flaws in a configuration, where problems were easy to occur in complex configurations, and how to make adjustments during concrete production, and so on. These were all extremely valuable parts of the virtual brain system and its accompanying user manual. After many days of reading and learning, Luonan's horizons had been greatly broadened from a newbie who didn't understand a thing. At the very least, he possessed the most basic aesthetic ability in this field. Now he had entered the stage of learning how to walk under the support of the system. There was a proper term for this stage. It was called having high expectations but low ability. Looking at countless cases, Luonan felt that his chess was beautiful, but when he truly got down to it, it was a long story. It's time to move the seed imprint over. Luonan gave an order to Mo Luan, who was hiding in the depths of the void. Mo Luan's current soul body of black smoke had already reached the acme of concealment as a pure energy construct. He quietly extracted the wreckage of the electromagnetic Vanguard 1 from the depths of the lava without alarming the Vulcan ant colony. Under Luonan's instructions, Mo Luan tore away the useless parts of the wreckage, leaving only the head module intact. The virtual brain system drove the divine binding hoop module to realize a self-inspection interface refresh. Right now, the head armor played the role of a protective shell. According to the results of the self-inspection, the outer tantalum alloy armor was perfectly preserved. Luonan was relieved as he ordered Mo Luan to place the helmet into the lake of lava in the forest of stone lava. After the helmet entered the lake, it floated in the center of the lake of lava, rolling endlessly. Right now, the color of the boiling lava in the area of the lake of lava in the forest of stone lava was quite distinct from other areas. The color inside grew brighter and brighter. It gradually turned from dark red to bright red, orange, golden yellow, and finally suffused with white light. Dark veins of blood seeped through the interior. This meant that the temperature of the lake of lava was rising. Basically, the temperature of the lava exposed to the air was 1,300 degrees at most. But under high pressure and other special environments, it was a different story. For example, right now, the divine binding hoop's self-inspection interface instantly sent back the temperature information of 1,700 degrees. This was due to the special configuration of the Blood Soul Temple. After absorbing Luonan's soul strength and many other layers of energy, it had an interference effect on the plane of reality. In such an environment, the harassment and infiltration of the Vulcan ants could be avoided. The seed imprint could also learn how to efficiently absorb and utilize energy. It could gradually mold and restore the powerful structure and instincts that originated from the golden tree. Luonan went to look at the data of the helmet armor. The research and development of the tantalum alloy was originally for the purpose of probing the surface of the sun. It could withstand a high temperature of over 5,000 degrees. This military material had to take into account more performance indicators. There were some trade-offs. The current upper limit of the helmet's heat resistance was approximately 4,000 degrees. The upper limit of the heat insulation was 2,000 degrees. It was absolutely safe. The magnetic energy core inside would not be destroyed. But the problem was that complete heat insulation was not right. Why is the magma lake only 1,700 degrees? Luonan smacked his head with his notebook. As mentioned before, Luonan did not find any basis for the true structure of the Bloodsoul Temple from the Bloodflame Order. He completely relied on the virtual brain system and the user manual. He gradually estimated the input data and used its simulation calculation function to re-estimate the design. The virtual brain system was very powerful, but Luonan was a complete armchair strategist. The specifics would depend on the actual situation. Looking at the temperature of the core of the magma lake, there was still a problem. The energy needed to restore the golden tree seed imprint to its peak state was undoubtedly astronomical. At the same time, there must be an efficient mode to control this astronomical amount of energy. Both were indispensable. Luonan had painstakingly built the forward base and assembled electromagnetic Vanguard 1. He had gone in a large circle to bring it over. He had squeezed out and revived its combat instincts to the greatest degree. He had cultivated it externally and strengthened it internally in preparation for its rapid growth. For this reason, he followed the basic design of the Bloodsoul Temple to simulate and improve a set of gradual absorption and utilization of energy. The front was fine, but there was a problem with the absorption and utilization of heat energy. The efficiency had to be cut by at least half. Could it be that the interference strength isn't enough? But if I were to increase it further, the thermal efficiency coefficient would be too ugly. In the end, I still haven't broken through the critical point. Luonan had to admit that there was still a problem with his design. He had the calculation formula, the system simulator, and all sorts of cases to refer to, but he still couldn't do it well. This was a bit shameful. There was nothing he could do even if it was shameful. Right now, he could only verify and calculate anew to see if there were any problems with the modified configuration design from before. This made the work even more complicated. It was even more difficult than attacking the fire god ant nest. Luonan calculated until the sky was dark, and the earth was dark under the double blockade of the calculation formula and the structure. He was completely unaware of the passage of time. Perhaps he slept in the middle, or perhaps he didn't. In any case, he was muddle-headed. His mind suddenly stirred, and a moment later, the alarm of the simulator rang. Someone came in. It was Ruei-1. Luonan slapped the notebook against his head. He decided to go out and get some fresh air. When the simulator opened, he saw a little girl carrying a food container that was over 1/2 meter tall. She was waiting outside. Oh my thanks. Luonan first revealed a smile. Then he came to a realization. Didn't you say that I don't need to deliver food? Breakfast. Ruei-1 responded simply. Oh, it's morning already? Luonan looked at his watch. It was already 8:30 in the morning on the 22nd. Countless formulas and basic structures spun before Luonan's eyes. Comparatively speaking, the feeling of his stomach was more real, especially after he saw the 1/2 meter tall multi-layered food container. He was really hungry. Chapter 605. Just come over. There are a lot of people up there. Oh, the Mystic Arts Research Society has begun to arrange a theme for this week. This wasn't the main point. Luonan understood that Ruei-1 was saying that there were a lot of people in gear right now, so she had traveled through space without going through the security system's inspection. The little girl certainly had this ability, but how did the food box and the food inside come together? He removed the lid. It was quite sturdy. Then there was the breakfast inside. Porridge, side dishes, and sliced beef. This was his favorite combination, and the amount was sufficient. But thinking about how they were mixed and vibrated in the void, then categorized and reorganized. This seemed to have already exceeded the limits of Luonan's thinking. Luonan gave up on thinking deeply under Ruei-1's gaze. In any case, he had never really figured out Ruei-1's mysterious gift. Breakfast and whatnot, as long as it could fill his stomach, it was fine. If he really put in a piece of wood or porcelain or something, with his 9 apertures and 6 roots technique to strengthen his internal organs, his life would not be in danger. After confirming that Ruei-1 had already eaten, Luonan began to sweep through the food box. But he hadn't eaten 2 bites when the God-binding hoop's real-time tracking detection reported abnormal information. And the simulation results of the virtual brain system still differed from the ideal value. Luonan subconsciously opened the design blueprint and looked at the critical points that the system criticized as missing. He scratched his ears and cheeks and tried to make some changes, but he nearly caused the disastrous consequences of collapsing. He was scared to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat, but he was even more unwilling. He simply straightened out the design from the beginning, and then he plunged headfirst into it, unable to pull himself out. He came back to his senses once more because the light shone onto Rue Wen's body when he expanded the area of the projection work area. Right now the little girl was hugging her knees as she sat in the corner. She was in a daze silently, and the tidy food box was placed next to her. She had already done her utmost to avoid interference, but the projection light instantly expanded outward. She couldn't react in time. Luonan froze and stopped writing. You didn't go back? Today is the weekend, right? Auntie and Emoya didn't drag you out to go shopping? I told you. I was with you. I told Auntie. Luonan's self-service translation was on point, but he sweated a bit. Rue Wen's explanation clearly conflicted with his reason for taking a day off. She was certainly allowed because Mrs. Luo Shuqing had her eyes closed. He looked at his watch and was shocked to find that it was already past 10. The little girl had been huddled in the corner for half the morning without a word. Luonan let out a sigh. He felt that he owed her quite a bit, but he was a bit delighted in his heart. Clearly, Rue Wen was closer to him. Oh, this was even more unfair to her. He made up his mind, closed his notebook, and temporarily cleared his mind of calculations and simulated configurations. He pondered on how to take Rue Wen out to play and relax. But where? Just as he was hesitating, Rue Wen's eyes focused. Is it very difficult to calculate? Luonan was a girl of. Luonan was a bit embarrassed, but he still honestly admitted. It really is quite difficult. Although we have the simulation system and the configuration module, there are too many other systems in the Blood Soul Temple. It's fine on the spiritual level, but when it comes to the material level, we have to replace them one by one and even reorganize them. This is too much, and it's not easy to take care of everything. Luonan had a belly full of bitterness from the recent mental challenge. He opened his mouth and couldn't hold it back. He said a bunch of things in a muffled voice. Only after a while did he realize that something was wrong. He saw Rue Wen's earnest but not necessarily clear eyes, and he slapped himself in the face. He was quite a good-for-nothing. He had poured a pile of emotional garbage onto the little girl. Luonan hurriedly stopped. Cough. It's just a minor detail. Don't mind it. Rue Wen continued to stare at him. What's the main point? Oh my. She even knows how to ask a question. Luonan was a bit surprised. He pondered for a moment before answering seriously. The main goal is purification. Purification of the cloud world. He opened his mouth and his emotions came back. He began to gesture. The cloud world. I told you about it, right? It's the place where that big monkey came from. Rue Wen looked as if she understood, but she didn't. Luonan knew that it would be very troublesome to explain in detail. Oh, it just so happened that he needed to accompany Rue Wen. Chatting and exchanging would count, right? Wait a moment for me. Flag bearer. Luonan prepared to go all out. He awakened the military AI of the laboratory and searched the database for materials, organizing them. A few minutes later, Luonan turned off most of the laboratory's lighting. He adjusted the projector and entered playback mode. The pitch-black space became the best background, revealing a gorgeous starry sky. Under Luonan's control, the projection screen gradually enlarged and focused. More and more details appeared in this starry sky. From the Milky Way to the Orion Arm, to the Gould Belt, to the local bubble, to the interstellar cloud, all the way to the solar system and Earth. Every time Luonan looked at this set of star material, he would have the marvelous feeling of being insignificant and jumping about. This was even more so after he received the external neuron. His mind became more and more subtly blurred as he let his mind wander. His mind wandered. However, Rue Wen was also lost in thought. It looked like she was very interested in this set of star atlases. Perhaps this little girl would become an astronomer in the future? All right, this was also his imagination. It was paternalistic. Luo Nen calmed his mind. After the irregular blue sphere of water, the earth, occupied the central position, he picked up his digital pen and drew a few dotted lines on the edge of the sphere. Under the effect of the simulation engine, a blurry section of two bubbles colliding and warping was formed. At the other end of the section, Luo Nen used a gentle brush technique to outline smooth lines. It was like a dense weave of flowing clouds, spreading out layer by layer. This is the cloud world. Right now it is colliding and making contact with the space and time we are in. This is the marvelous space and time anchored by our mother. Yes, our mother anchored this place. This is a place that I must explore and protect. Luo Nen looked at Rui Wen's focused gaze as he spoke to this point. He was a bit embarrassed. Instilling this sort of emotional thing into a child didn't seem too appropriate. He organized his train of thought and directly led to the main topic. Right now in the cloud world, there are two enemies of mine. It's probably because of my mistake that they managed to break in. One of them is extremely powerful and extremely hard to deal with. He wanted to plot against me before. And I don't want him to ruin my mother's work. So I want to get rid of him. Hold on, it seems like this direction isn't too good. But Luo Nan thought about Jin Tong, who died by Rui Wen's hand. He chanted an Ba and braced himself to continue speaking. He had been monitoring Gong Qi and Snake Tongue for a very long time through the soul cloak. He understood some details that he wasn't too clear about before. For example, Gong Qi wanted to get rid of him through the veil of silence. Or the complicated relationship between Snake Tongue and Gong Qi. After straightening things out, he explained the cause and effect to Rui Wen. His reasoning was quite clear. At the very least, he felt that Rui Wen should understand him. Rui Wen did understand. She gazed at the sketch of the cloud world drawn by Luo Nan and asked softly, "Is that person more powerful than Jin Tong?" Luo Nan thought for a moment and said, "You can't compare it like this. Jin Tong is on the fleshly side, while Gong Qi is on the mental side. Before we got rid of Jin Tong, Her Majesty Empress Wu had already beaten him to a pulp. A huge flaw was revealed in his mental state. That's why you and the Wraith sign attacked him from the inside and outside, taking his life in an instant. Although Gong Qi's soul and fleshly body have been forcibly separated, he still retains the majority of his abilities. He has maintained quite a bit of patience these past few months. Even if he loses his balance for a moment, he will be able to quickly adjust. As for us, it's impossible for us to find someone like Her Majesty Empress Wu with combat strength. After all, I don't want the secret of the cloud world to be known by outsiders." Rui Wen didn't speak anymore. This meant that she understood everything. Luo Nan began to rotate the blue ball of water in the projection area after clarifying his goal. This projection image was actually a holographic model of the Earth from the military's database. Aside from the optical imaging satellite, it also involved many confidential basic surveying and mapping data. Its precision and accuracy were worthy of trust. If Luo Nan wanted to, he could completely focus this holographic projection onto any region of the globe. The average resolution could reach around 5 millimeters, and there wouldn't be too much distortion. Right now, his destination was a certain volcanic archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. It was the Chan City region where the headquarters of the Ability User Society was located. If we want to make a move against Gong Qi, we must first place our focus here. This is the place where Gong Qi's fleshly body is stored. This is the place. Right now, the terrain displayed is undesirable. Headquarters should have done something to it, but they never imagined that our Luo family's formatting theory combined with the condensation ring would have such an astonishing effect. Luo Nan spoke loftily. He had already entered a state of complete immersion. He pointed at the topographic map of the volcanic archipelago and spoke without end. These words had been bottled up in his heart for far too long. He never had the chance to pour them out. Even if it was impossible for Rui Wen to give him any advice, she was undoubtedly a qualified listener. To a speaker, that focused and earnest gaze was simply an incomparable enjoyment. My plan is to first use the Wraith Sign's Polar Domain Blood Soul Cannon, just like Luo Yuan's Dimensional Crossbow. I'll instantly break through the defenses and directly eliminate Gong Qi's fleshly body. I'll seize the energy of his fleshly body. Then, I'll take advantage of the attack against Gong Qi and the maturing Jintang puppet to immediately return to Shi Yunduan and surround him with all my might. If everything goes smoothly, then we'll have an extraordinary level meat shield like Jintang. We'll have Yuan X and Mo Luan to interfere. We can basically recreate the scene when we killed Jintang. In the end, Rui 1, you'll be the one to make the final decision. Of course, these are just plans on paper. We might need to make adjustments when we actually carry them out. Rui 1 listened attentively and even asked, "Practice is preparation." Luonan knew that Rui 1 was talking about the offensive and defensive practice of the Blood Intent Ring in the Abyss region these past few days. This was the operation he was proud of. Yeah. Ghost Eye is also a mental type extraordinary. His fleshly body is in the open sea. The practice in Xia City is all on the mental plane. It's quite similar to Gong Qi's situation. Rui 1 nodded in understanding. I will work hard. Chapter 606. Seeing Rui 1's super serious appearance, Luonan couldn't help but rub her head. The little girl's hair had just grown to around 10 centimeters. It was a bit manly, but it was soft to the touch. It was as if there was nothing there. It matched her slender figure quite well. She had the appearance of a girl worthy of protection. Oh, protection? This thought came suddenly, but it reminded Luonan once again. Even if Rui 1's talent was unparalleled, she was at most 13 or 14 years old. Her mental age would only be younger. This sort of matter shouldn't involve her. Needless to say, the link she was involved in was critical and dangerous, instantly deciding life and death with an extraordinary. How many people in this world could do this? The more he thought, the more ashamed Luonan felt in his heart. He subconsciously held the back of Rui 1's neck lightly, making the little girl lean a bit closer. He spoke very seriously, Rui 1. Remember this. All you need to do is repeat that attack against Jintang. I will do my utmost to prepare everything else. We need to make sure that nothing goes wrong before we execute the final step. Otherwise, even the tiniest flaw will be pushed back. There's no need for us to take risks with that old bastard Gong Qi. We're still young. We can forcefully outlast him to death. We just need to be able to do this before he unravels the secrets of the cloud world. Luonan's words were more like a frame for himself when he spoke to the end. He could already feel it, but the growing emotions in his heart pushed him to complete this promise. Rui 1 was a bit stupefied by Luonan's long string of words. Her eyes looked over in a daze. Luonan also felt that his words were a bit too heavy. He hurriedly changed the direction and method of the topic. He chatted about some of the links and measures in his plan. There's a lot of work to be done on the details to complete the plan. Take the Wraith Signs cannon in the polar domain for example. It's not easy to blow up the fleshly body of an extraordinary, even if it's just a psychic. I've looked up the relevant information. Actually, there really isn't much difference between extraordinary in terms of fleshly body strength. There are even some psychic extraordinary who don't have the requirements of flexibility, toughness, and reaction. They can operate their fleshly body into a fortress. In terms of pure defensive power, they are even more exaggerated than some fleshly bodies. Therefore, the shell must possess a certain amount of strength. It must have the ability to instantly penetrate and destroy Gong Qi's fleshly body. I chose Jintang's seed imprint because I valued its potential. It could instantly absorb Gong Qi's physical energy to strengthen itself. If everything went smoothly, it could also be used to kill Gong Qi. Of course, it wasn't strong enough at the moment. All I wanted to do was to charge it up to at least B+. It would be even better if it could reach A+. However, the energy needed for the conversion process was astronomical. At first I was hunting in the cloud world. The life energy of the mush-mouthed ape was very pure. It was a pity that the seed imprint's instincts were not dug deep enough, and he could not control it, wasting a lot. Furthermore, the more I hunt, the bigger the commotion will be. Gong Qi is extremely sensitive over there, and I'm worried about being discovered, so I can only replenish on Earth. Now I'm here. Luonan rotated the virtual Earth to return to the Eurasian continent from the Pacific Ocean. He locked onto the volcanic region 2,000 kilometers away. It's here. This place has a closer connection to the cloud world. It's suitable to build a tunnel to deliver resources and equipment. That's why we chose this place. As for the suitable environment, that was a pleasant surprise. Luonan enlarged the projected image as he spoke, letting Rue Wen see even more details. This included not only the topography of the volcanic region, but also the relationship between the map of the cloud world and this region. Do you see? I didn't just randomly scribble. This region is actually the intersection point of the cloud world and the space-time collision contact of Earth. I have discovered 2 such intersection points on Earth. One is here, and the other is the region of Xia City where we are located. It's not Gear. It's 300 to 400 kilometers outside the city. Gear's situation is a bit special. It is the core gear that my mother constructed. Its purpose is to act as a fulcrum, to anchor the clouds across space. It's not the same thing as a space-time collision. Oh, maybe it has a bit of an impact? Luonan really didn't dare to make a conclusion. Why did the cloud world in Xia City have such a fate? Perhaps Gear could be considered an explanation? He was stunned for a moment, but he finally remembered that Rue Wen was still listening to his explanation. He coughed and went back on track. In short, the cloud world is currently leaving the volcanic region. Xia City is gradually approaching. Given the clear crustal activity in the volcanic region, and the recent earthquake in Xia City, I suspect that it is closely related to this sort of space-time collision contact. Having said this, Luonan was worried that Rue Wen might not be able to understand if he spoke too deeply. He asked, "Do you understand? Don't you find it boring?" Rue Wen didn't respond. She just stared at the projected image. Her eyes didn't even blink. It was great to have an audience like this. Luonan was satisfied to see Rue Wen's attitude, regardless of whether she understood or not. Of course, he did his best to make things more interesting. It's right here. The location I'm pointing at is 1,000 meters underground. I discovered a fire god ant nest. It has a unique social ecosystem, and the surrounding environment of lava. It is extremely helpful for the conversion and utilization of energy. I've even set up the Blood Soul Temple there. It's the one that just tormented people. It was originally just a structure on the mental plane. I personally modified and designed the structure in order to realize it on the real plane. Unfortunately, there are many problems right now. The most annoying ones are the internal pressure and temperature. Luonan talked about the design of the lava lake in the stone forest. Even though he was singing a one-man show from beginning to end, as long as he had Rue Wen's focus gaze, he would be in high spirits. He was still not satisfied after he finished talking about the lava lake. Luonan chatted with Rue Wen about the special environment of the volcanic area. The fire god ant nest is probably the most complex structure that can be constructed out of all the known mutants. The height of its core area is equivalent to a 200 to 300-story skyscraper. Each branch structure controls an area with a radius of over 100 kilometers. Within this area, it can also control other mutants to serve it. It is the overlord of the volcanic area in name and in reality. I've read related papers. It should be through the hormones it secretes that it reacts with a certain parasitic fungus in the volcanic area. The resulting compound acts as a medium to realize this function. If it weren't for the fact that their collective consciousness hasn't developed over the years, and that they have a fatal weakness in energy control, Spring City would probably have to migrate. You don't know how dangerous it was when I controlled the electromagnetic Vanguard 1 to kill my way through. I was lucky enough to discover a fissure created by an earthquake in time, bypassing the most difficult 10 kilometers. Otherwise, I might not have been able to kill my way to the center of the nest when you came this morning. Luonan spoke excitedly. He used his sketching ability to draw a corresponding sketch in the projection work area. Unfortunately, it wasn't as detailed as the virtual Earth model. He could only make do with looking at it. If everything goes smoothly, the second and third floors of the Blood Soul Temple will be constructed in another 50 to 70 hours. I will attempt to cultivate the collective consciousness of the fire god ants and place them within the Blood Soul Temple. With the help of the Wraith sign, there should be a way. If I really succeed, then I can attempt to control the entire fire god ant colony. When the time comes, this volcanic area will become a kingdom under my control. Luonan spoke with great vigor, but he felt that the meaning of the joke was a bit thicker. Conquering an ant society. When the time comes, I can say that I'm the king of the fire god ants. Cough. This name is more like that, but don't laugh at me. When the time comes, you'll be the fire god ant princess. Ruewen didn't laugh. She just stared at him with her pitch-black eyes. Luonan was truly embarrassed. He hurriedly denied himself. Forget it, forget it. The cloud world is more suitable for us. Over there, the clouds cover the sky. You can't see the end. Countless secrets are hidden there. Wait until we smoothly eliminate the opening of the palace and purify that place. Then I can say that I'm the king of the clouds. And what about you? The princess of the clouds, okay? He told a clumsy joke, but Ruewen seemed to like it a lot. Her gaze was a bit vacant. It was as if her gaze pierced through the multicolored projection, pierced through the earth and the sky, and pointed 2,000 kilometers away. It also pointed behind the barrier of space and time. The meaning in her eyes was perhaps longing. This sort of Ruewen was far too rare. It was to the extent that Luonan instantly understood this mood. He blurted out a few words. Do you want to go? Ruewen suddenly turned her head. She didn't speak, but her eyes lit up. Luonan had a headache the moment the words left his mouth. But when he saw Ruewen's dazzling eyes in an instant, his impulsiveness and headache transformed into formal consideration. His brain spun at lightning speed, and his thoughts directly transformed into words. He didn't bother with embellishment. The fire god ant nest is too dangerous. There's no place to stay for now. It's not suitable for you to go. However, we can first go to the cloud world. Ruewen stared at him, the glow in her eyes growing brighter and brighter. Actually, it's quite difficult for me to go to the cloud world by myself. I'm talking about going by myself. It's quite difficult for me to go there by myself because I can't fly. I'll just be like a rock. I'll keep falling down. But you can. The more Luonan spoke, the more he felt that it was reliable. With your ability to merge body and soul, as long as you have my support, it's not much different from truly flying. There's absolutely no problem for a short period of time. Do you want to go? It seemed that Ruewen had already forgotten to speak. She just stared at Luonan's face. First she blinked her eyes. Only when she saw that Luonan still had a smiling face did she subtly lower her head. She waited for Luonan to confirm that the words that came out of Luonan's mouth would not change. She finally increased the scope of her movements and nodded forcefully. At the same time, a smile spread across both sides of her cheeks, completely softening the contours of the muscles and bones of her face. Not a single bit was held back. In this instant, what Luonan saw was the purest expression of emotions he had ever seen in his life. She was like a pure and innocent infant, and there was an additional touch of moving color. Chapter 607. The astral winds whistled and the clouds surged. Occasionally, a shower of ice crystals would blow past, reflecting the firelight that seeped through the gaps between the clouds. It was dazzling and possessed destructive power. Luonan felt quite marvelous as he watched the ice crystal shards penetrate his body. Recently, he mostly used the soul cloak to observe the cloud world from afar, monitoring the whereabouts of Gongqi and Snake Tongue. Firstly, it was convenient. Secondly, it was safe. Today, his soul entered the out-of-body state, and he especially interfered with the clouds to form a half-real, half-incorporeal water vapor humanoid. He felt a bit of novelty when he first used it. If he was like this, then there was no need to mention Ruewen, who entered for the first time. The little girl's figure flickered back and forth between the clouds, appearing and disappearing erratically. She was still adapting to the feeling of flying through the air. Occasionally, Luonan would need to interfere with the void to lend her strength. However, seeing her more and more agile and free performance, it seemed that flying unhindered through the clouds and leaving no traces behind wouldn't be an obstacle that was difficult to surpass in the near future. Thinking too much is useless. Being in a good mood is truly good. Luonan took care of Rue when as he split a bit of his attention to lock onto two targets several thousand kilometers away. Right now Gongqi and Snake Tongue were together. They seemed to be studying a mushed-mouth ape. This was a living body that they had caught with great difficulty. Controlling it was quite troublesome. Snake Tongue was a B-rank curse mage. She didn't possess an overwhelming advantage when compared to the mushed-mouth ape. She was tossed around quite a bit when she was alone in the cloud world. Hehe. Luonan sneered. Ruewen suddenly hovered in the air at this time, coming to a steady stop by his side. The structure of her body and soul formed an intense resonant relationship with the surrounding clouds of the void. It caused Luonan's water vapor humanoid form to distort a bit, but it soon began to decrease in magnitude. It was even more restrained and restrained. 10 seconds later, it was nearly impossible to detect unless one deliberately probed. Huh? You can fly now? I'm still trying. Ruewen gave a simple answer. Her slender figure undulated a bit as she enunciated her words. 2 seconds later, she stabilized. Do your best. Luonan could only express this way when faced with Ruewen's talent. Next, Luonan took advantage of Ruewen's time to adapt to her new technique to begin his work as a commentator. He shared the scene of his perception through a closed system. It's these two. Our targets. As they spoke, Snake Tongue attempted to hypnotize and control the captured mushed-mouth ape with Gongqi's help. However, what awaited her was yet another failure. This wasn't the first time a similar situation had occurred. This made Luonan deeply feel that the day he caught the Wraith sign would be the day his luck attribute would go off the charts. Luonan gave Ruewen an explanation of what Gongqi and Snake Tongue were currently doing. In the end, he even went into a deeper analysis. Actually, Gongqi opening this project and giving Snake Tongue the opportunity to control the mushed-mouth ape might not be out of good intentions. He needs to find something for Snake Tongue to do. Remember? I said that these two people's situations are different. Both of them are trapped, but Snake Tongue has been misled by Gongqi. She believes that Gongqi can come and go at any time. She was fine before, but after being trapped in the clouds for 2 months, Snake Tongue's patience is about to run out. What replaced it is suspicion. If Gongqi can't bring out something new, we might be able to see them turn on each other. Actually, Luonan had thought of using this matter to make a fuss. However, after some consideration, he felt that this wasn't his domain of expertise. Playing schemes with Gongqi and Snake Tongue might alert the enemy and make things worse, so he didn't delve too deeply into it. Right now he was paying more attention to the technical segment. There were many problems he needed to solve if he wanted to kill Gongqi. This fellow Gongqi has the ability to teleport his soul body. I once saw him leap 2,000 kilometers in one go. He's extremely powerful. If we can't succeed in our first attack, he will very likely escape. Of course, we aren't bad either. But if the ambush turns into a chase, the variables will be too great. Ruewen floated to the side and expressed once more. I will do my best. No. This segment is mainly testing me. It's the problem of my control precision. Luonan didn't want Ruewen to add more pressure to herself. And it was just as he said. If he wanted to do a good job in the ambush, then he needed to completely play out all of his resource cards in the shortest amount of time possible. Moreover, he needed to accurately hit Gongqi's old face. Precision was the most crucial and direct requirement. It was even more important and more difficult than the strength of the artillery shell. The artillery strike that destroyed Gongqi's fleshly body in Chan City needed to be closely synchronized with the assault in the cloud world. The Jintong seed imprint needed to accurately hit Gongqi's fleshly body, which was under the layers of protection of headquarters. It needed to accurately grasp the time to seize the energy of Gongqi's fleshly body. Then it would accurately jump back to the clouds and join the ranks of those who surrounded and killed Gongqi. Any mistake in any segment would cause unexpected problems to crop up and produce variables. To put it bluntly, Luonan's plan wasn't perfect. Its tolerance for error was far too low. The possibility of interference was far too high. It was far too easy to lose control. But this was the only opportunity he could think of. It was also the only way to squeeze out all of Gong Qiqi's strength. Luonan's heart was apprehensive, but he had no way of telling this feeling to anyone. Luckily, he had Ruiwen. He had the best listener in the world. Right now, I can only use the observation and positioning of the large coordinate system to carry out the interference effect. Did I say the large coordinate system before? Oh, this is the name I came up with. I just comprehended it not too long ago. It can be considered my extraordinary domain, even though I'm not an extraordinary. It's using me as the origin and the body and soul order frame as the core law. I embed my own law within the interference area. Right now, my soul cloak has already covered nearly the entire Earth. Even though I can't receive all information at the same time, if I focus my mind, I can pour my attention to any point in the coverage area at any time. Once I realize it, I can do it. It looks very simple, right? But it's super difficult to actually do it. Luonan met Ruiwen's gaze and subconsciously extended his hand. He drew a draft diagram of space-time interference amidst the surging clouds. There are times when human strength is limited. It doesn't matter which side of space-time it is, the unchanging laws of physics still hold the absolute dominant position. I'm not the creator. I have no way of fighting against the structure of space-time. If I want to temporarily distort the laws of physics in the relevant area, I must satisfy many conditions on top of the foundation of a powerful energy output. Every missing condition will cause the energy output to increase exponentially until it exceeds the limits of my ability. Over. Chapter 608. With the number of extraordinaries and their reactions over at Chan City, even if the polar domain cannon succeeds in seizing the energy from Gong Qi's fleshly body, it will still be very difficult to drag the Jin Tong puppet back to the clouds and precisely place it next to Gong Qi. Luonan drew circles on the Tan City region as he spoke. Soon, the sketch was completely unrecognizable. He felt that he had lost his composure a bit. He shook his head and turned his face to see Ruiwen's particularly serious expression. TSK, even a little girl doesn't look favorably upon me? Actually, the pressure in Luonan's heart had been dispelled quite a bit with the narration just now. He actually laughed when he saw Ruiwen's appearance. He extended his hand to stroke the little girl's head. Ruiwen's hair was fine, smooth, and soft. It was like silk and muslin. Even though Luonan was in an out-of-body state, interfering with the water vapor of the void to take human form, the sensation of her hair was still wonderful. Don't be nervous. Have a bit of confidence in me, okay? Luonan didn't want Ruiwen to worry, so he changed the topic. Don't look at how difficult the matter is. It's not impossible. Otherwise, why would I be single-mindedly thinking about smashing my head against the wall? Ruiwen raised her head slightly, allowing the half-real, half-incorporeal hand of water vapor to brush through her hair. Her eyes were still staring at Luonan, not blinking at all. Luonan felt that he should demonstrate his strength. He erased the sketches floating in the clouds and drew a new set of images. It was a 3D image of a seemingly ordinary gear. Using this as a foundation, he sketched out the lines and rendered the background. In the time of a few breaths, he had drawn a very familiar architectural scene in the cloud world. Oh, this is the North Coast gear. Our mother's masterpiece. Do you remember what I said? It doesn't belong to the intersection point between the cloud world and our local space-time. But I'm connecting to the cloud world here. The precision of control is the highest when compared to the volcanic region and the wilderness of Xia City. Luonan drew the intersection point between the cloud world and local space-time. He gave the other two intersection points disproportionate marks for illustration. Then he asked, knowing the answer, "Why is it like this?" Gear is the fulcrum that anchors the cloud. Ruiwen really did answer. She was basically repeating Luonan's original words. But she was able to extract these words from Luonan's large number of explanations in the first instance. It was enough to show that she was listening very seriously. Luonan's heart felt warm. He couldn't help but laugh out loud twice. He reached out his hand again and stroked Ruiwen's soft hair. His heart unconsciously rose quite a bit. That's right. Gear is the fulcrum that anchors the clouds. How can it do this? That's because our mother used the method of coupling, using herself as the central axis and her own order framework to drive the environmental forces of the surrounding area layer by layer, forming a formless and moving gear set for her use. The surrounding area doesn't just include Xia City, it even includes the space and time of the cloud world. With our mother's ingenious means, the cloud world and the local spacetime opened up a spatial tunnel, creating a special structure that connected the two spacetimes. Luo Nan endlessly drew details on the cloud sketch. He also poured out the results of his research during this time. Normally, Gear on the North Bank is just an ordinary building. It doesn't have a direct connection with the cloud world. The structure that runs through space and time is fractured. The most crucial link has been extracted. But if we have our Luo family's formatting theory to activate the telescope in the atrium of Gear, then we have the external neuron in our hands as a special key. The structure that runs through space and time can be reconnected and reconstructed, recreating this miracle. What do you think? Isn't it awesome? Rue Wen gazed at the constantly perfecting sketch and slowly nodded. Luo Nan grinned. His appearance was a bit odd on the water vapor humanoid, but this wasn't the main point. Right now he spoke excitedly once more. Gear on the North Bank is the best reference for me to increase my precision. You must know that our mother wasn't an ability user. At the very least, she wasn't an especially powerful ability user. She didn't possess an extraordinary domain. She was unable to impose her own laws and rules on the two sides of space and time. But in the end, she was still able to successfully construct the inconceivable spatial tunnel. Moreover, it was still able to maintain its operation many years later. This is, without a doubt, the result of her coupling theory. She used a tiny basic gear to drive a complex structure, and an astonishing number of gears. She used a crowbar to pry up the entire Earth. Driven by his emotions, Luo Nan's water vapor humanoid fluctuated a bit. His pen moved even faster. He drew out a few results from observing Gear, observing the cloud world, and observing the structure of the spatial tunnel. He already had a certain result. Of course, it couldn't be considered particularly perfect, especially in the aspect of models. Whether it was geometric structure or algebraic structure, he still didn't have a completely self-consistent result. I'm currently searching for a suitable mathematical tool in the virtual brain system. Fine, I admit that this kind of result is a century or two ahead of the times. There should be a few other fulcrums. It won't be easy to thoroughly research it, but it doesn't matter. I can still imitate and reproduce it. If it really doesn't work, I can just copy Gear to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Luo Nan hadn't completely sorted out his later thoughts, so he didn't go into detail. Right now, he was just doing this to pacify Rue Wen's emotions. He didn't forget that he brought Rue Wen to the clouds today to rest and play. Talking about too many serious topics was meaningless, right? At this time, several thousand kilometers away, the two monitoring targets also made some movements. The experiment of controlling the mushed-mouth ape had yet to make any progress, so they began to roam and search once more. They probed the structure of space and time in the cloud world, accumulating data and information for their escape. Gongqi has the ability to teleport. His scouting range is large. We need to maintain a certain distance from him. Oh, but there's no need to worry too much. We'll definitely take the initiative. Luo Nan was prepared to take Rue Wen for a stroll in the cloud world. Though this place was extremely monotonous, it was still a bit interesting to see the churning clouds, the flames rushing to the skies, and the mushed-mouth ape flying back and forth. There was a mushed-mouth ape approaching at high speed from over 700 kilometers away. This strange demon of the cloud world had the ability to fly untraceable. It just happened to be what Rue Wen needed. And he had always felt that the attack methods of this demon were a bit like muddling the body and soul. It was similar to Rue Wen's miraculous talent. He just happened to bring this little girl over for reference. Let's go consult the mushed-mouth ape's methods. Luo Nan confirmed the target and shared his perspective with Rue Wen. He explained in passing, that mushed-mouth ape, isn't it bigger than Yuan X? Actually, Yuan X was like this before. I just tried to move its two arms into local space and time, and my soul strength was nearly sucked dry. Rue Wen? Chapter 609. Rui 1. Not easy to control. The little girl's lips moved slightly. Were it not for Luo Nan's powerful mental senses, he would not have been able to hear these words clearly. Ha! Luo Nan didn't understand. Not easy to control? Hovering in the air? Oh, you haven't completely learned how to fly yet. Let me lend you some strength. Rui 1 shook her head slightly. The environment. It's very difficult. Her voice grew even quieter. It seemed that it was especially strenuous. This was absolutely not the result of not being able to fly. Rather, it was more like being bound by an invisible bird net, restricting her ability to move. Luo Nan really jumped in fright. He hurriedly turned around to see what was going on. But when he extended his hand to touch Rui 1, a low hum rang out. The front of the water vapor humanoid's arm was instantly smacked to pieces by the vibrating vibrations of the void. Luo Nan's out-of-body soul also received the attack, due to being in an interference state. His entire body was stupefied. And Rui 1 on the other side was like a taut and released elastic that bounced away. Her figure collapsed backward, bouncing 50 meters away in the blink of an eye. Rui 1. At this moment, Luo Nan faintly sensed that there was a problem with the void structure of the cloud world. But he didn't have time to think too much about it. The partial interference of his soul cloak was pulled back. He wanted to protect Rui 1, to prevent her from being injured by any means. The problem was that when his soul cloak tried to exert force by interfering with the material plane, what it touched was a wave of high-speed vibrations of the void string. The scene of the water vapor humanoid's arm collapsing apart a second ago was perfectly replicated in this moment. The pulled-back soul cloak was torn apart by the incorporeal vibrations. Not only was it unable to help Rui 1 control her body, it instead stimulated an even greater vibration. It caused Rui 1 to turn into a little bird that had lost control. She leaped high and low in the clouds, falling back and forth. She appeared to be particularly excited at first glance, but in reality, she wanted to return to a state of stillness. The scene was actually a bit comical, but neither Luo Nan nor Rui 1 were able to laugh. This was like climbing onto a trampoline. If they wanted to stabilize themselves, they had to press down on the collapsing bed, or they had to wait until all of their kinetic energy was exhausted. Fortunately, Rui 1 herself was extremely calm. She didn't resist the turbulence of the void. She only adjusted the frequency of her body and soul merging. Layer by layer, she neutralized the impact. The extent of her tumbling became smaller and smaller. Gradually, she was able to control herself. Luo Nan let out a breath of relief. He did not dare to rashly interfere with the surrounding environment and cause more trouble for Rui 1. He simply switched his soul cloak to a pure observational mode, probing the cause of the turbulence in the structure of the void. The structure suddenly became complicated. The space-time structure of the cloud void was different from the space-time of the Earth. Luo Nan knew this, but previously he was not affected by it. At most, when he was considering the structure of the trans-space corridor, he would add 1 or 2 more parameters. But now, in the area around Rui 1, it was as if there were countless randomly vibrating spring pieces. When this layer stopped, another layer stirred up, twisting together and affecting each other, causing the clouds and the void to be thrown into disorder. There was no doubt that there was a problem with the deep space-time structure. It was only because Luo Nan had the clairvoyance method of the large coordinate system that he was more sensitive to the curvature of space-time and structure. He was able to discover the blurry and complex details within. After no less than 20 seconds, Rui 1's figure stabilized again. The little girl looked left and right. She moved her hands and feet lightly, and there was a clear correction in the frequency of her body and soul muddling. Only then was she certain that she had broken free from the disturbance of the space-time structure. Rui 1 still did not dare to move even now. She floated in the middle of the flowing clouds, casting her gaze over a distance of over 100 meters. Her body was restrained. She was like a child who was aware that she had caused a great disaster. Her expression was one of rarely seen fear and pity. Luo Nan flew over in a hurry. He subconsciously extended his hand, wanting to confirm whether or not she was injured. Halfway through, he discovered that it was inappropriate. He could only caress the little girl's forehead and brush aside the messy hair on her forehead. He asked hurriedly, "Are you hurt?" Ruiwen subconsciously avoided his gaze. It seemed that she was a bit afraid of him. This was a very rare situation. Luonan was worried and baffled. "What's going on? Where are you hurt?" "There's no precision." "What?" This was the first time Luonan felt that Ruiwen and he were not on the same wavelength. If this continued, he could only touch her. Ruiwen simply buried her head under Luonan's gaze. Her voice became even deeper and a bit hoarse. "The structure here is too complex. It's very hard to have precision in an assassination." "You?" Luonan was stupefied. Even though his soul was in an out-of-body state, he still felt an intense trembling sensation. He asked subconsciously, "Precision? You can't control it? Is it hard to display your body and soul fusion in this place?" "When I jump." Ruiwen's words were incomplete, but Luonan still understood. "Normal movement is fine. But if it's like when you killed Jin Tong, can't you jump through space?" Ruiwen buried her head even lower. She didn't make another sound, but it was clear that she was tacitly agreeing. Luonan was really stupefied. At this moment, the heart of his main body, which was far beneath gear, was about to jump out of his chest. The scene of Ruiwen struggling to adapt to the void in the clouds came before his eyes. That's right. Luonan had guessed it. Ruiwen should have wanted to attempt to jump through space. But when she used the form of body and soul fusion to interact with the clouds in the void, the structure of space and time manifested an extremely astonishing complexity. It brought Ruiwen far too many disturbances. It destroyed the stable rhythm of her body and soul fusion. There was no need to say what happened next. How could it be like this? A Gongqi. What about Gongqi? Gongqi also had the ability to jump through space and teleport. But why didn't he have any problems? Luonan pondered it over and over again. He felt that there was only one reason. Gongqi came in the form of an out-of-body state. Snake Tongue, who he often brought along with him, was the same. Perhaps the astonishingly complicated disturbances and changes like Ruiwen's would not occur if she used the form of pure energy to shuttle through space and time. Otherwise, she could be like the mushed-mouth ape. She could fly purely with her fleshly body, not involving techniques like the void shuttle. But why didn't any problems occur when he used the airdrop to transport supplies through the cloud world? Well, it was useless to think about these things. The crux of the matter was, what to do, what to do, what to do. Luonan's mind was a chaotic mess at this very moment. Ruiwen only appeared for 1/10 of a second, or even 100th of a second in his entire plan. But she was the deciding force of victory. If a problem occurred in this segment, then all his other plans would become a joke. Luonan's mind was spinning in circles, but Ruiwen's whisper reached his ear. "I can do it." Huh? Luonan wasn't able to react in time. And at this time, the water vapor forearm formed from interference trembled once more. It was suddenly bounced away by the tyrannical shockwave from Ruiwen's body. Ruiwen. Luonan shuddered. He subconsciously wanted to exert force, but he fell half a step behind. The little girl's figure was like a fragile bubble, vanishing between his fingers. Luonan understood what Ruiwen wanted to do right now, even if he was an idiot. The little girl actually wanted to forcefully practice the void shuttle. Did she really think that the structure of space and time was a trampoline? Luonan's thoughts flashed, and he heard an extremely subtle shattering sound come from the surrounding mist. It was completely different from the pure vibrations of the structure of space and time before. This time, his scalp really exploded. He wanted to use the soul cloak to forcefully interfere, but he was worried that it would backfire on him. He could only shout over and over again, "Stop! Ruiwen! Stop!" Ruiwen didn't listen to his command. Her figure just flashed within Luonan's sensing range before disappearing. Then she continued to flash and disappear in the surroundings like a flying phantom. Reality was hard to distinguish. Buzz. 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 Luonan wasn't too sure about the specific structure of the surrounding space and time. But the rumbling sound, which was continuously pushed higher and higher, struck directly at his heart. It was as if it could become a mourning sound of collapse and destruction at any moment. Luo Nan stomped his feet in anxiety, but he was simply unable to stop Rue Wen from practicing. He could only use his mental senses to lock onto Rue Wen's figure with all his might. He watched as she shuttled through the void, controlling the landing point of her figure with difficulty. Rue Wen only needed to adapt to a single structural frequency with each jump on Earth. But right now, she pierced through a layer, and then another layer followed. She was strong and weak, fast and slow, and they were even diametrically opposed. The complex, fragmented, and irregular structural pattern made one simply go crazy just by watching. The more Luo Nan watched, the more worried he became. He couldn't care about anything else. He shouted at Rue Wen. Rue Wen, let's pause. Pause, okay? I can. Rue Wen's voice was small and trembling. She still didn't listen to Luo Nan's command, and her voice clearly carried subtle emotions. Luo Nan never expected that Rue Wen would actually have such a stubborn and rebellious side to her. He could only lock onto Rue Wen's figure and earnestly persuade her. Let's go back. Let's go back and find some time to do systematic practice, okay? We need to do some preliminary research first. Don't forget that I'm the guide. You'll be fine, but I won't be able to if a problem occurs. We need to solve this matter together. Rue Wen responded 2 seconds later, but there was no change in her voice. I can do it. Rue Wen. Luo Nan was practically roaring. This time, what answered him was an even more intense trembling in the surrounding void. The turbulent shock waves even traveled several hundred kilometers away, twisting the clouds and causing them to scatter and shatter. The shock waves possessed an even greater impact force in the central region. Luo Nan's water vapor figure suddenly froze on the spot. It was severely warped and deformed. His consciousness seemed to have been cut into several pieces, turning upside down and in disorder. At the same time, he clearly sensed a cacophony. It was so discordant and ear-piercing. But in the next second, the vibration became smooth. It was as if someone was plucking the strings of a zither from the depths of the clouds. It was excessively deep, making it impossible to hear the true melody. But the smooth, graceful, and orderly vibration cut through the whistling clouds and astral winds. It transmitted into Luo Nan's soul, resonating with him. Luo Nan was stupefied for nearly 5 seconds before waking up, as if he had just woken up from a dream. He unleashed the senses of his soul cloak to lock onto Rue Wen's position, but there was nothing under his senses. Luo Nan's soul was about to freeze in that instant. Chapter 610. The region where the oscillation occurred was located 400 meters away. It was extremely easy to distinguish whether it was through mental senses or naked eye observation. Luo Nan could see that the surrounding clouds were roiling and opening up in that region. No matter how fiercely the astral winds pushed the clouds, they were unable to fill up the small, irregular cavity that was 3 meters in diameter. The cavity itself was like a hole that had been forcibly cut open. There were even a few warped threads of light hanging from it. This feeling of disorder extended out from the hole. The light in the surroundings of the cavity was clearly warped, suffused with a faint scarlet light. It was a bit similar to the light that seeped through the gaps between the clouds, but it had a more substantial feeling. This formed a region that was clearly different from the surrounding void. It was indescribably strange. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. His mental senses had turned into a mass of chaos after the hole was broken. It was like when he had just started out and encountered a powerful B rank. The relevant region was disturbed into a complete mess, a vast expanse of fog. Moreover, this irregular cavity was rapidly shrinking at an obvious rate. When Luo Nan discovered it, it was approximately 3 meters in diameter. In the 1 second it took for him to rush over, it had already shrunk by at least a quarter. And the speed at which it was shrinking was growing faster and faster. What was that? Luo Nan's mind was a mess. There were only questions and no answers. And at this time his other sensing method, his sealed system, grasped the whereabouts of Rue Wen, the unfixed star. She was on the other side. She was within the hollow region. That was the best answer. The irregular cavity continued to shrink. Luonan simply didn't think of anything else. His water vapor figure flashed, and he directly passed through the hole, throwing himself into the boundless and immeasurable cavity. A thought flashed through Luonan's mind the instant he entered the cavity. Was I too impulsive? The tiny stray thoughts were completely drowned out by the treacherous and oppressive scene before his eyes in the blink of an eye. The pressure within this irregular cavity was extremely astonishing. The water vapor figure formed by the interference of his soul body evaporated into nothingness the instant he entered the cavity. Luonan nimbly withdrew all forms of mental and material interference, but he soon discovered that it really was like he had crashed into a region covered in fog. Everything was a vast expanse of gray. What about the light outside? Before Luonan could get used to it, countless twisted and complex structural fragments stimulated his mental senses. It didn't matter if they were meaningful or meaningless, understandable or incomprehensible, willing or unwilling to receive, they all transformed into an immeasurably terrifying flow of information. They flowed along the sensory channels he habitually spread out, and they were fed back one after another. They poured into his soul, filling it to the point where it was off the charts. Structural fragment? Luonan was only able to extract this abstract word from the chaotic and berserk information. Then he was smashed into stupefaction by the devastating impact of the information. Under this assault, Luonan's sensing range was compressed and compressed, refined and refined, shielded and shielded, but he was still unable to resist the pressure of the terrifying flow of information. In the blink of an eye, the range of his spiritual senses had shrunk to less than 3 meters in diameter. And it was still shrinking. He felt so dizzy that he even lost control of his out-of-body soul, until he hit a seemingly gray, tangible barrier. Luonan woke up with a start. This gray and hazy barrier looked like a curtain that was pieced together from countless messy fabrics at first glance. It was even like a wall of fog that didn't have any substance. But when Luonan truly came into contact with it, he was able to sense that it was a special creation that was formed from countless complex and chaotic structures. Luonan's perception and thoughts had already been severely warped and compressed. He was temporarily unable to distinguish what this thing was, but he was able to sense the extremely unstable and tyrannical energy vortex above it. It was because of this inadvertent collision that a berserk energy violently surged out from this barrier of unknown origins. His soul body nearly melted within the powerful magnetic field, and was consigned to eternal damnation. Even Luonan's soul body was stiff. He was barely able to keep his soul from scattering within the powerful and chaotic magnetic field. He slowly adjusted the direction of his thoughts and perception. The essence of the soul body's observation was mental sensing, and Luonan himself controlled many types of sensing, ranging from the low end to the high end. He went from constantly interfering with the material plane to pure observation that didn't interfere at all. Luonan fully deserved to be called the top master of mental sensing in the inner world. But here, within this gray and hazy mist, Luonan was able to switch between many types of observation within this extremely limited space. He piled up the results of his perception observation layer by layer, but the situation before his eyes still didn't have any essential changes. In other words, he was already lost within this gray and hazy maze of fog of unknown origin. F***ck me. Luonan couldn't hold back from cursing. Right now he couldn't care about anything else. He just wanted to know where Rue Wen was in such a vile environment. Was she alright? Venting his anger was a bit beneficial. Quite a bit of the fretful and fearful elements had been dumped out, and his mind became a bit more clear. More importantly, he looked within his mind and confirmed once more that Rue Wen's star was still within the sealed system. It was radiating a scorching splendor. Her specific location. Huh? She's so close. Luonan and Rue Wen's consciousness completed an even higher level of connection at this moment. Luonan subconsciously called out, Rue Wen. The dusky mist barrier in front of Luonan was the strange creation barrier that nearly caused Luonan to melt within the powerful magnetic field. It suddenly fluctuated, and its entire structure seemed to be collapsing. Its density dropped at a rapid pace, and then it collapsed and dispersed into a mass of misty smoke. Luonan confirmed that there was a buzzing, vibrating sound ringing out in front of him. Countless meaningful and meaningless structural fragments were being unfastened and unhooked. Some of them disintegrated without a sound. Some of them were dragging along faintly discernible electric flames. They were even like blades grinding against each other. The area in front of him was still dangerous enough to make one shiver with fear, but there was a slender figure in the depths of the gray and hazy mist, going from blurry to clear. She gradually approached until she arrived in front of him. Rue 1. Luonan instinctively reached out to touch her, but he forgot that his water vapor human form had already collapsed. He touched nothing in an instant. In the end, Rue 1 still stopped incomparably real before his eyes. Her cheeks were fine, but the clothes on her shoulders, chest, waist, legs, and other areas were inexplicably torn. Especially the area above her left knee. There was a piece of cloth that simply disappeared, revealing the fine white and powerful muscles of her leg. Rue 1 seemed to know that she had gotten herself into trouble. She buried her head even deeper. Only now did Luonan discover that it was his turn to get angry when he saw her in this state. But in this mist maze where danger lurked on every side, he saw Rue 1 standing alive and well before him. There was no emotion that could compare to the joy of reunion. So he was completely unable to find the dignity of a parent. He could only ask over and over again, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Rue 1 shook her head almost imperceptibly. Then she whispered, "It's too deep. I can't reach it." Chapter 6:11. There are many layers here. They affect each other. And then? Traveling through space will cause interference. The resonance frequency must form a concordant interval in order to eliminate it. Concordant interval? Luonan and Rue 1 spent quite a bit of effort to communicate. The little girl's ability to express herself was a bit problematic. Her vocabulary was limited. It was probably because she had recently learned the guitar from Moya. She even interspersed proper terms from the field of music. In the end, Luonan had a superficial understanding of music theory. He knew that the concordant interval was a musical interval that sounded pleasing to the ear. It was a musical relationship that was relatively harmonious in the auditory impression. Rue 1 made an analogy. For the time being, Luonan didn't know whether it was appropriate or not. He understood the gist of it. You're saying that the resonance frequency of your body and soul fusion must form a harmonious relationship with the multi-layered structure of space and time, just like the chord of the guitar in order to guarantee precision? Rue 1 furrowed her eyebrows. It's not enough. Why? Hold on. Let me guess. You just said that it's too deep. I can't reach it. Are you saying that there are too many layers of the structure of space and time? It's like a guitar doesn't just have 6 strings but 16, 17, or even more. It's super complicated to completely control it. It's impossible to play a tune. The metaphors of the two could be said to be a mess, but this kind of communication method was actually quite useful. Rue 1 gaped. Perhaps she lacked confidence in her ability to express herself. In the end, she just nodded her head lightly, indicating that this was what she meant. Excellent. Excellent. Luonan's doubts were resolved. Plus, Rue 1 was perfectly fine before his eyes. Luonan felt much more at ease. His mind spun all the more nimble, and his train of thought became clearer. In the current situation, he needed to ensure that he and Rue 1 were safe and sound. He needed to determine where in the world this misty labyrinth was. He also needed to figure out why such a situation would appear in the cloud world. The normal structure of space and time had yet to be penetrated. There was a layer of logic hidden within. It could be seen that the cloud world itself was abnormal. The cloud world. Luonan wasn't the least bit surprised to encounter this scene. He discovered early on that the cloud world was completely different from the local space and time of Earth. The first stop of the Soul Cloak's expansion was the cloud world, half a month ahead of Earth. But now, the Soul Cloak was about to cover the entire Earth, while the cloud world had yet to be touched. In Luonan's understanding, the cloud world was like an infinite replication of the misty scene. It formed an incomparably vast maze. Now, although he had stumbled into another fog maze and felt that it was also full of danger, compared to the surface phenomenon that he could not figure out at all, there seemed to be more opportunities and starting points for him to explore. Ruiwen, do what you did just now. Ruiwen was becoming more and more obedient right now. She would do whatever Luonan said. Under Luonan's command, she displayed her technique once more. It was as if she was playing a guitar. She gently plucked at the incorporeal chords in the void, clearing a temporary passageway within the dusky mist. The essence of what the little girl was doing was still based on the foundation of body and soul. She resonated with the structure of the void and achieved the unity of the inside and the outside. However, during this process she adopted a more advanced and exquisite technique. She found fragments that could resonate harmoniously in space-time structures of different frequencies, and avoided the relevant conflicts. Thus, she opened up a passage in the complicated structure environment. Unfortunately, the passage was drowned out by the surrounding fog in less than 2 or 3 breaths. Well done. Luonan didn't care how long the passage lasted or where it led. Instead, he seized the opportunity to fiercely praise Ruiwen. No matter what, he had to pull the little girl out of her depressed and remorseful mood first. Moreover, Ruiwen's miraculous methods really did give Luonan a good entry point. It also gave him a gap to catch his breath. Luonan had yet to condense his water vapor human form under the ever-present pressure of the misty maze. He could only barely maintain the narrow range of his mental senses. This lasted until Ruiwen plucked the cords and the mist before his eyes dispersed. The surrounding pressure clearly loosened and dropped. Luonan finally found an opportunity. He shouted to himself. I was not the I from before. The form, sound, and meaning didn't match. But Luonan's goal was clear. He borrowed this chance to visualize the mysterious I character. His mind naturally congregated. Then he used the pure observation mode to comb and adjust his mental senses anew. He re-established the large coordinate system. He slowly but surely seeped into the impermanent gathering and scattering mist. He recalled his previous experiences, including today's observations, and the results of his earlier observations. He formed a basic judgment regarding the logic and mysteries of the misty maze, and even the cloud world. This place is the accumulation of many configuration fragments. Ruiwen looked at him attentively. The distance between the mental plane and the material plane did not affect her clairvoyance. She was like a well-behaved elementary school student, earnestly listening to her teacher's lecture. Luonan felt a bit ashamed. He had only been able to strip away the clues within by relying on Ruiwen's miraculous methods. What he was doing right now was nothing more than a theoretical derivation and conclusion. Luonan continued to observe the changes in the misty maze, especially the dissociation, friction, and reconstruction of those shattered structures in the depths of the mist. These were the configuration fragments he speculated about. They were like countless catkins floating in the air. They came and went with the wind, hugging together randomly to form all sorts of hairy balls. It was just that the internal structure mechanism was hundreds of millions of times more complex. Due to its complexity, a portion of this random structure process was successful. Perhaps it was meaningful. There was also a considerable portion that failed. Perhaps it was meaningless. But regardless of whether these structures were meaningful or meaningless, they all seemed to revolve and pile up under some sort of mechanism. They formed a boundless misty environment of varying thicknesses and densities. Even the density was different. Then this complex maze was constructed. And if one were to push a layer deeper, the misty maze is like this. Perhaps the cloud world outside is like this as well. It's just that its operations are more concealed. If it weren't for your fleshly body traveling through the void and causing a huge commotion, you wouldn't have been able to see through this layer of cover. I couldn't see through it. Gongqi also couldn't see through it. Ruiwen stared fixedly at him. Her appearance made Luonan want to reach out and stroke her hair. Unfortunately, he was unable to do so for the time being. He could only continue to reason. In this way, we can make a hypothesis. This misty maze is an even deeper region of the cloud world. If the cloud world is a display, a projector, an output that is like a scene between reality and fantasy, then this place might be the mainframe. The wiring and whatnot looks extremely messy, but if we follow the clues and search, we will always find the CPU. Am I right? Ruewen was silent. Her brows were even slightly furrowed. It seemed that she was doing her best to understand and ponder. She looked extremely cute. Chapter 6:12. There's something? It's only normal to have something. Since this misty labyrinth was the host, possessing its own operating laws and rules, then it was normal to have a CPU hidden deep within. However, Luonan was unable to guess what this CPU looked like. He asked Ruewen, but he did not receive an accurate answer. Ruewen just shook her head. I can't see it. It's normal that you can't see it. Luonan's large coordinate system was doing its best to expand its range, but its progress was still slow. It had not expanded beyond 10 meters to this day. This was the law of order of the misty labyrinth. It suppressed the external order frame with Luonan at its core. Luonan was mentally prepared for this. He just asked Ruewen in passing, "How far can you see?" Ruewen did not immediately respond. Instead, she furrowed her brows once more. It seemed that this simple answer exceeded the scope of her ability to express herself. Yes. Is the environment very complicated? Luonan was a bit surprised at first, but he soon reacted. Ruewen's ability to express herself was a bit bad, but she certainly had no problems with basic concepts like length and distance. The misty labyrinth's complexity was certainly beyond imagination for her to be able to make things difficult for him. Sure enough, Ruewen quickly nodded. Oh, the eyes are the most important prerequisite. Ever since Luonan entered the inner world, he had always used his mental senses first. He had the advantage of information, and he had been successful in every endeavor. Now that he was affected, he would be out of sorts. His thoughts naturally turned in this direction. Of course, the reason why he was thinking this way was because he already had a decision in mind. Luonan saw that Ruewen did not quite understand his meaning, so he explained the current situation of the large coordinate system being suppressed. He also took the opportunity to explain how he should deal with it. Luonan would feel that he had lost out if he did not properly utilize such an outstanding listener. It's not enough to rely solely on the large coordinate system to solve this problem. The basic mode of operation of my large coordinate system is to use my own order frame as the standard. I use my own extraordinary domain to forcefully replace the natural order of other spacetime structures. It's fine if it's purely observation. It's nothing more than a label conversion. But if I carry out mental and material interference, it's the same as going head-on against the order of the entire spacetime structure. However, in actual operation, we can use more advanced and ingenious methods to bypass this obstacle. Do you know what that method is? Luonan was about to announce the answer, but he didn't expect Ruewen to actually open her mouth and answer after a short period of thought. Coupling. Oh right. Luonan was both happy and surprised. How did you guess? You said it before. I said it before? Luonan's mind spun a few times. He finally remembered that he had given Ruewen a proper introduction to the subtleties of coupling theory before he entered the cloud world. At that time, he was only half venting and did not expect Ruewen to fully understand. However, it seemed that Ruewen already had a basic understanding of coupling theory. One how, he one yang, one God, one not to, 1 one like. It was based on a controllable order frame. Through effective design, it would form a coupling with multiple other order frames to form a set of gears to guide the direction of power. To put it simply, it's using order to guide order. According to the virtual brain system's explanation, this is a type of basic yet high-end configuration thinking. Luonan naturally entered a state of unceasing torrent when he spoke about this aspect of theory. At this time, he wasn't just giving Ruewen a lecture or showing off. Instead, he was seizing the opportunity to organize his thoughts. The laws of order in this misty maze are suppressing me greatly, but we have to see that it is still very straightforward compared to the cloud world outside and the local spacetime on Earth. Most of its pressure is on the surface. The interference and pressure of the misty maze was definitely far above the cloud world and the local spacetime. But from another perspective, purely using the controllability of the rules of order as the standard, the corresponding difficulty coefficient should be arranged like this from top to bottom. Local spacetime, cloud world, mist maze. Based on Luonan's current insight and knowledge, the structure of the local spacetime where Earth was located was established on the basis of organic unity between the extremely large macroscopic and the extremely small microscopic. Simply speaking, the intrinsic structure had already exceeded the scope of Luonan's perception. If it weren't for the magical effects of the mysterious character, in addition to the warping of the cloud world and local spacetime, Luonan might not have been able to produce an intuitive understanding of the corresponding structure. What's more, the structure of local spacetime was purely based on matter. It formed its own laws and rules. The position of extraordinary power was extremely awkward. Most of the time, Luonan was in a predicament of being like a mouse pulling a tortoise with nowhere to start. The cloud world was a bit better. At the very least, the space-time structure had faintly discernible traces of processing. It gave one the bare minimum of imagination. But if one really wanted to start, one would know just by looking at Gongqi's fate. In comparison, the mist maze displayed a scene. The mechanism and structure of the mist gathering and dispersing was admittedly exquisite and extraordinary, but the majority of its scale was still within the scope of Luonan's observation. The dust-like structure fragments clearly had a very close relationship with the CPU, in the depths of the structure. This gave Luonan a very good entry point. Consider the self. Consider the environment. Consider the framework of compromise between the self and the environment. Whether it's in formatting theory, configuration theory. Fine, even on the level of traditional philosophy, this is one of the most essential rules. The difference lies in the specific implementation methods and methods. I've put quite a bit of effort into this recently. Luonan was still chattering on endlessly. He talked about how he would use coupling theory to build a fog lamp that was more suitable for long-distance observation on top of the soul cloak. Don't blame him for chattering. The surrounding mist that gathered and dispersed irregularly, as well as the configuration fragments that formed the mist, revealed a myriad of shapes and forms. They gave him far too much stimulation and inspiration. Even though a considerable portion of these dust-like configuration fragments no longer possessed any structural significance, they still had an enormous base to support them. They still displayed astonishing diversity. Just from the range of 10 meters that Luonan was currently able to observe, a conservative estimate was that the number of flying, gathered, and dispersed configuration fragments would exceed 100 million. Even if the vast majority of them were destroyed, the remaining ones could be divided into at least 10 major categories according to the discrimination theory of the virtual brain system. There were 300 to 400 specific structures, and there were countless variations. The more Luonan probed, the more he couldn't extricate himself. For a beginner like him, this was the most extensive and most vivid living example. He could verify, he could practice, and he could temper himself as a reference. With these examples, the concise and dry theoretical descriptions on the user's manual seemed to come alive. They could manifest on the plane of reality at any time. Chapter 6:13. Bang bang bang. The dull thuds were mixed with the man's rapid breathing. The inside of his lungs and the outside of his sweat were both evaporating and burning violently. Phew, the human body has always been a clumsy assemblage, heh? The continuous heavy punches landed on the thick boxer target. Not only were they hitting the thick material, but they were also colliding with the aura of the young expert behind him, which was as heavy as a mountain. The rebounding force was almost suffocating. However, Black Wolf still wanted to speak. In the noisy environment, his voice was unconsciously getting louder, and his emotions became more and more agitated. Decades of cutting-edge research. It all proves this point. From the human body structure to genetic inheritance. You're a completely illogical ghost. Like, bang bang bang. Black Wolf's punches were faster and fiercer than the one before. His clash with the boxer target also became more intense. His exchange with his sparring partner was already close to a confrontation. The two of them changed their footwork and moved their bodies, exceeding the standard of boxing champions in the normal world. The sparring partner's head blocked behind the boxer target and replied in a muffled voice, "The physical side is not weaker than the mental side." Upper limit, upper limit. Black Wolf jumped to attack, but he grimaced because of the pain in his spine. His punches were a little weaker, but his voice was getting louder and louder. How can a lousy foundation build a skyscraper? It's still a barbaric growth period. In the near future, you. Again. Look. Enough, brother Black Wolf. I've had enough for today. The sparring partner could not take it anymore, not with his fists but with his emotions. He jumped back, indicating that he should rest for a while. Black Wolf's bare upper body was already steaming. Beads of sweat hung on his eyelids. He bent over and gasped for breath. He only raised his eyelids and looked at the young sparring partner in front of him who was stronger than him. Phew Lei, do you think that I look down on the physical side while I'm tired like a dog here? My words and actions don't match? No such thing. Shui Lei took off the boxer target and wiped the sweat on his face. Actually, our dojo master said something similar. Oh? Shui Lei smiled. Dojo master, you said that there is a limit to the human body, and you want me to come into contact with the exoskeleton technology to fully connect with the times, so I came to this training center? Your dojo owner runs a dojo, right? Not bad. Not only are you adept at imparting martial arts, you also have such a way of thinking. Black Wolf also threw down his boxing gloves and ended the final practice. He got off the ring with Shui Lei. Actually, in ancient times, many traditional philosophies already had this understanding. Just like in Buddhism, it is said that the human body is a stinky skin bag. Isn't there a saying that goes, "Fill up the stinky skin bag all day long, when will the day come for transcendence and reach the shore?" For us cultivators, we mainly use it to overcome disasters and temper our minds. It's fine as long as it's enough. We can't hang on to this tree forever. If there's a chance, we can totally find another way. Shui Lei did not know how to respond. Black Wolf grinned, revealing his sharp canine teeth. At our level, immortal souls are no longer empty talk. It's still the same saying. The physical body is only the foundation for germination, not a cage to trap. So I'm very open-minded now. When my injuries are more or less healed, I'll apply for a deep physical transformation to improve the physical body and the environment for my soul. Or I should thank you. You're my benefactor who woke me up. No. Shui Lei was dizzy when a phone call came in. He secretly sighed and picked it up without even looking. But in the next moment, he suddenly froze on the spot and straightened his back even more. Auntie Luo. Oh, I'm not with Nanster right now. It's fine, it's definitely fine. Rui Wen is also very familiar with them. It's definitely. I mean, I know she's with Nanster. Yes, don't worry, it's definitely fine. The phone call was quickly hung up. In just a few short sentences, Shui Lei's body was already drenched in sweat from his training. He subconsciously shivered. Oh my God. Black Wolf was a little puzzled. What's wrong? An elder is asking me about something. Wait a moment. Another phone call came in. This time, Shui Lei glanced at it. It was Xie Junping. Brother Ping, Auntie Luo also called you? No wonder. Don't use me as an excuse. How would I know where Rui Wen went? That girl comes and goes like a ghost. Did she order breakfast from Sister Cat Eyes this morning? Then she must have gone to Gear. Okay, Gear is full of people right now. It's not convenient for Brother Qin and the others. I'll go over. Did you just come out from the orphanage? How about you take a turn and pick me up? I'm at the Exoskeleton Training Center in Trigate District. Okay, thanks a lot. I'll wait for you at the main entrance. After talking for a while, Shui Lei finally straightened out the situation. He turned his head and said, Brother Black Wolf, you see, I have something to do over here. Okay, you go. I'm almost done here. We'll talk later. Black Wolf was also smiling. His thin face was rather sunny. Shui Lei replied with a smile and took his leave. He hastily took a shower and took the free nutritious meal from the training center. He waited by the side of the road while eating. A few minutes later, he saw Xie Juanping's phantom flying car drive over. The two were familiar with each other, so Shuelei didn't regard himself as an outsider. He stuffed the nutritious meal into his mouth, puffed his cheeks, and helped open the door and get on the car. It was already nighttime by now. People were coming out from the training center one after another. Among them was Black Wolf's thin, tough, and valiant figure. The two called out to Black Wolf. Someone drove over to pick him up. They waited for him to get on the car, and Xie Juanping drove away. Xie Juanping casually asked, "Who was that?" Shuelei swallowed the nutritious meal and said, A fellow member of the society. He came here for rehabilitation. In the past. How do I put it? It was pretty complicated. To put it simply, I was the main culprit who made him come here for rehabilitation. It was at the end of September when the human-faced arachnid disaster happened. Brother Black Wolf was a member of the operation team. He was careless and was controlled by a human-faced arachnid. It attacked Nanster and I just happened to run into him. Shuelei gave a general explanation of the situation at the time. Black Wolf was the most unlucky member of the operation team. His spine had been injured by Shuelei in the fight in the elevator. He had only recently recovered and was undergoing rehabilitation. Shuelei happened to follow the society's introduction and went to this training center to do exoskeleton training. The two sides met. "Oh, you beat him up like this. Wouldn't I take the opportunity to beat you to death?" I was in a hurry to save him. Besides, Brother Black Wolf is quite magnanimous. He's a bit. Sigh. What's wrong? Nothing. I just wanted to ask, Brother Ping, what do you think about the relationship between body and soul when you study and cultivate with Dean Wan? Forget it, it's useless to ask. Xie Juanping laughed. Under the influence of Dean Wan, the order of creators he belonged to could be said to be the most staunch materialist. There was no place for pure spiritual bodies such as souls. Of course, Xie Juanping had not reached this level yet. He could only be regarded as a practical person. As long as he could cultivate extraordinary power, he had no other desires. Seeing that the topic was drifting toward cultivation, Xie Juanping glanced at the rearview mirror and said, "The one behind, Black Wolf, right? His car has been following behind." "Are you sure?" We the Order of Creators must maintain a high sensitivity to all specific material structures. This car has been following us since we left the training center, and the distance hasn't changed. Could it be that Black Wolf wants to find a place to beat you up? Shuelei laughed. Don't think too much. There's only one main road back to the city in the Trigate district. We're not going back to the city, we're going to Acumen College. We've already switched to 2 city highways in the middle, and it's still following us. Although that was what they said, neither of them took it seriously. What happened behind them seemed to be fair and aboveboard. Maybe it was just a coincidence? But half an hour later, they arrived at Acumen College and entered the underground parking area. Looking at the flying car behind them, they couldn't help but look at each other. Xie Juanping gasped. He's not really here for revenge, right? Can I get out of here first? As they spoke, the car behind them pulled up. The window on one side opened, and Black Wolf waved at them. "Lei, you're here too? Isn't it the weekend today?" Shuelei greeted them from behind Xie Juanping. He couldn't help but be surprised. "Brother Black Wolf, you guys are..." Black Wolf grinned. "Senior brother and I took a private job from the Starry Sky Club, so we came over to take care of it." The senior brother Black Wolf spoke of was the person sitting in the driver's seat. He looked to be middle-aged. His hair was slightly gray, and he gave off a sense of vicissitudes. Apart from that, there were almost no other striking features. While Heilang was talking about himself, he nodded to Shui and Xie in acknowledgement. He looked calm and reserved, not the kind of person who liked to socialize. Everyone had things to do, so they didn't say much. They parked their cars and parted ways. Xie Juanping and Shuelei took the streetcar. The exit was near the South Bank Auditorium, so they could only walk for the rest of the journey. They hadn't even taken a few steps on the bridge when they heard a noise in the sky. Lights gathered and projected into the forest. It was a light transport plane that could take off and land vertically. It was specially used to transport equipment and supplies. Looking at the position where the transport plane was hovering, Shuele gasped. "What's with this big scene? I have too much money to burn." Xie Junping was like an extreme hater of the rich, drawing Shuele's sidelong glance. Xie Junping continued to smirk. "The more I work, the more I find these silk pants to be an eyesore. F***CK. It wasn't easy to build up this place, and now it's turned into a construction site." Xie Junping's feelings for gear could be said to be second only to Luo Nan's. This building had been cleaned and renovated twice, and he had been the one to do it each time. He hadn't even paid this much attention to his own house. Xie Junping couldn't help but feel uncomfortable seeing the fruits of his labor change beyond recognition. He mumbled to himself as he walked inside. He walked from the forest path to the small plaza in front of him. He was just about to enter the lobby when a shadow suddenly leaped past his feet, bringing with it a gust of wind. Chapter 614. The shadow suddenly came to an abrupt stop, and its plump body slid on the ground, leaving a long wet mark. In the next second, Jerry, the muskrat that had already become Rue Wen's pet, plunged over and hugged Xie Junping's trousers with quite a bit of strength. "Ouch, my pants, my shoes." No one knew where Jerry came from, but the fur on his body was half dry and half wet. He swung his long tail, causing the ground to crackle. He looked anxious and restless. Xie Junping said that he disliked it, but if he was really angry at it, he wouldn't have called it son. He and Jerry could be said to have gotten to know each other through a fight. Back then they had fought for several days and he hated this muskrat to the core. But later, this little thing was nowhere to be found. When it appeared again, it had already transformed into Rue Wen's pet. This was how people felt. The same target, but when looked at from a different perspective, the original torturous became nimble. The problem was that Jerry was quite aloof and cold. He was someone who would look at the dishes on a plate. Aside from beauties like Rue Wen, Luo Nan and Cat Eyes, he loved to ignore everyone else. It was unprecedented for him to look for someone to back him up so impatiently. Xie Junping was amused. "Hee, you only think of me when there's something. Who provoked my son?" While he was playing with it, an elevator went down to the lobby. A group of people went out and happened to meet Xie Junping and the others. The one in the lead was young and had a baby face. However, his eyes were filled with sharpness. When he saw Xie Junping, his attitude was subtle. "Senior Xie, are you here to supervise again?" Xie Junping looked up and smiled, then lied through his teeth. "Brother Oh, it's not like that, I'm just taking a walk to digest my food." The younger brother Oh was au Quebec. He had just entered his first year of university, but he was already a senior figure in the Mysterious Arts Research Society. He was also a technical expert in the society, and he was quite accomplished in the research of the mysterious arts. Some time ago, the Mystical Research Society was in a mess. The former president, Du Yong, had resigned, and the team was restructured. OK had become the youngest vice president. Especially after the successful capital injection of LRCF, in a series of equity changes, his family's company became one of the top 5 major shareholders of the club. With this capital, this young man's voice in the club was very powerful. No one liked to be told what to do, especially by young and vigorous people. OK had always been rude to Xie Junping did not expect to be on good terms with everyone. Furthermore, the person in front of him was 5 to 6 years younger than him. There was no need for him to go against her forcefully. Otherwise, he would be seen as a bully. He casually replied, then smiled and asked, "Shall we call it a day?" The corner of OK's mouth twitched. On the contrary, everyone is burning the midnight oil. Xie Junping was quite surprised. "Is it that urgent?" OK ignored him and walked straight out. The group of people behind him also followed him, looking rather imposing. It was a good thing that Xie Junping was in Acumen College. He had scoundrels and dogs everywhere. He casually stopped the person behind him. Old Hai, what's going on? Old Hai, who had been stopped, was someone who knew how to curry favor. His position in the Mystic Arts Research Society was neither high nor low, and he was also one of Xie Juanping's eyes and ears. He immediately said, "It's very urgent. They say that they want to smash all the ice on the lake tonight." Lake? Xie Juanping and Shuelei didn't understand. OK, who had been in front, was very dissatisfied with his own subordinate, and an outsider in private. He turned his head and retorted, "Senior Xie, this has nothing to do with who you're supervising, right?" Xie Juanping was not angry when he said this, but Jerry, who was under his feet, became even more irritable. It bared its teeth at OK and even let out a strange squeak. OK glanced at the little thing. "It's freezing outside. Senior, you should stay in the house and see if there are any areas that violate the rules. When you have time, you can give your pet a vaccine. Also, carry it far away so that it doesn't get eaten by the cat." With that, he walked out of the hall with large strides. Xie Juanping was still not angry. Instead, he vaguely grasped a certain important point. At that moment, he didn't care about Jerry's half-wet fur. He bent down and reached out to carry the chubby little fellow in his arms. He chased after her with a cheeky smile. "With my son's skills, 1 or 2 stray cats are nothing. Speaking of which, old brother O, are you going to break the ice on the opposite side of the lake? Are you preparing to go winter swimming?" Humph. OK did not want to answer such a stupid question. In the end, Old Hai gave the answer. "It just so happens to be the other way around. The society wants to hold a flame ritual." Lighting a fire? Lighting a fire on water? Xie Juanping's eyelids twitched. He and Shuelei glanced at each other. At the same time, they thought of the withered tree sandbar that stood alone in the middle of the lake. Shuelei sucked in a breath of cold air. He couldn't help but open his mouth to ask, but Xie Juanping gave him a meaningful glance. He wanted him to first confirm Luo Nan and Rue Wen's state. Xie Juanping continued to ask OK with a thick face, "Brother O, the water fire is quite innovative. But lighting a fire in the middle of a jungle is a bit of a procedural problem. You don't mind having a discussion, right?" OK shot him a cold glance. He wanted to curse, but he still remembered Xie Juanping's position in the student council. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Okay. It just so happens that a professional team has arrived. We don't need to go through the procedures again." At this time, there were already people coming down from the transport aircraft. They unloaded the equipment and made the preliminary preparations. It looked like it was indeed as OK said. It was a professional team. The Mystical Research Society was willing to pay the capital. They really did have the capital. Xie Juanping shot them a glance and chuckled. "Fine. Then we'll have a discussion on the spot." Actually, there was no need for a formal discussion. Xie Juanping and his gang of scoundrels could get a general idea of what was going on. "Old Hai, are you guys playing with water turning into oil?" Old Hai was stuck in the middle, feeling quite awkward. He could only chuckle. "It's the reconstruction and deduction of a mysterious ritual." Mysterious ritual? Shuelei was even more surprised. OK was really impatient. "Senior Xie, you're a supervisor. There's no need to include the details of our society's activities, right? Everyone has a curious heart." Xie Juanping was still laughing. Old Hai, who was familiar with Xie Juanping, was shocked by his shamelessness. To put it bluntly, this was the result of him getting to know Luo Nan and following Dean Wan to train. Ever since he experienced the magnificence and wonders of the inner world, he looked at the little problems in a corner of Acumen College. His attitude was completely different. In the end, OK was still young. He was extremely annoyed by Xie Juanping's shameless pestering, but he couldn't find a reason to turn hostile. He simply turned his head and ignored Xie Juanping. At this time, Old Hai could only continue to be responsible for explaining. "We want to reconstruct and reproduce the Eleusis secret ritual. You've heard of this, right? So what if you look down on me? Don't forget, my best friend is a member of your society. Our school's student council has always been concerned about the direction of the society's activities." Xie Juanping had already completed his search at the speed of light as he spoke. The elusive secret ritual was one of the most famous and ancient mysterious rituals of the West. Some people say that it originated in the 19th century BC. It was fused with religious mythology during the ancient Greek era to obtain a stronger vitality. Through the stimulation of the search results, Xie Jinping had a faint impression of it. There was an introduction to it in the History of Religion course. Luo Nen seemed to have mentioned it some time ago. Old Hai continued to explain. He said that the Mystic Arts Research Society was preparing to reproduce this mysterious ritual in gear on the North Bank. Of course, they weren't just copying it. In fact, the details of this ritual had long since been buried in the dust of history. If they wanted to reproduce it, they could only reconstruct it creatively. Oh, great ambition. Xie Jinping expressed his admiration out of politeness. Old Hai cast a glance forward, and saw that OK had walked far away. He giggled and spoke in a strange tone. Yeah. Under the stimulation of male hormones, it's strong and straight. Ah. Old Hai smiled mysteriously. Speaking of which, Director Xie, you're no longer on the same level as us Ivory Tower people. This year, will there be? He drew a circle around the bracelet on his wrist. Those who understood this hint would understand it. Those who didn't would be confused. Fortunately, Xie Jinping was a first-rate veteran. He immediately raised his eyebrows. A banquet? Old Hai gave him a thumbs up. They're getting better and better at fooling little kids. Only after saying this did he remember that there were even younger participants this year. It was Xie Jinping himself who, after making a difficult decision, refused the opportunity to participate in the banquet for the first time in his life. This was because his cultivation was at a critical juncture. He could foresee a qualitative change in his life not too far away. Those excessively straightforward conquest games no longer possessed a strong attraction. He would not tell Old Hai such words. He only revealed a smile. Old Hai was not surprised at all. He took the opportunity to tell him what he had heard. I heard that this year, it's also the theme of mysticism. Many people in our circle have won the lottery. Hehe. What does this have to do with your reconstruction of the elusive ritual? It has a lot to do with it. Vice President O is preparing for this. He wants to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Did he go in the wrong direction? With the way things are over there, mysticism is just a gimmick. At the end of the day, it's still a matter of men and women. Old Hai chuckled. That should be right. I heard that he has already invited President Tang to be his female companion. This is the stepping stone. President Tang? Tangy? Xie Jinping was really shocked. Damn. They're almost 10 years apart. This kid is into this kind of thing? Could it be true love? There's still a backup. Our hibiscus flower. Fei Jin? Isn't she about to graduate? I understand. It's indeed true love. He had just come of age and was already in such a hurry to expose his taste. This kid was still immature. In comparison, the other younger one seemed to be about the same. He was overthinking. I still have to sort out the logic here. The banquet isn't going to be held here. Old Hai was surprised. You don't know? This year's main venue is set to be at Cloud City Water Village. A bunch of lively people are preparing to freeload on the periphery. Xie Jinping had already let the cat out of the bag. Old Hai did not think too much about it. He was just envious. This is a university town. Is there a better place to party and hunt? We can open up a second battlefield at any time. At that time, the entire Pingjiang district will be covered. This group of scum is getting more and more arrogant. Xie Jinping spat. His heart was itching. Fortunately, he immediately remembered Dean Wan's teachings. He recited the words "material nature is supreme" to settle his mind. Chapter 6:15. Before Xie Jinping could figure out what was going on, Jerry struggled to jump out from his arms. It slithered down to the ground like a wisp of smoke. It crossed the dense barrier of trees with a few steps and leaped onto the surface of the lake. It didn't care about the different layers of ice on the surface of the lake. It dashed towards the center of the lake. Son. Jerry. Xie Junping didn't manage to catch it, nor did he call it back. He just watched helplessly as the muskrat disappeared into the darkness. Everyone is very busy. Senior Xie. Can't you go somewhere else to walk your pet? OK's tone was becoming more and more unkind. Young people always cared more about other people's evaluations. OK didn't hear the conversation between Xie Junping and Old Hai clearly, but he subconsciously felt that it wasn't anything good. He just wanted this eyesore to get the hell out of here. The problem was that no matter how mischievous Xie Junping was and how humble he was, Xie Junping wasn't afraid of Quebec. Xie Junping acted as if he hadn't heard anything and walked 2 steps forward to the lakeside. He stared blankly at the surging lake water between the lakeside and the cracked layer of ice. Jerry, this little thing. What in the world was going on? There was also the tremor just now. At first he thought it was an earthquake, but then he felt that it wasn't like it. This was because the source of the tremor was too shallow and too close from the perspective of physical perception. After a rough calculation of the location, it seemed like Luo Nan's worrisome. Xie Junping let his imagination run wild by the lakeside. OK didn't get a response, so his mood worsened. Unfortunately, he couldn't really shed all pretense of cordiality. He could only suppress his anger and give an order to the captain of the engineering team beside him. The de-icing operation and the subsequent anti-freezing measures are your specialties. It's your job. However, we have very high requirements for the operation. All operations must conform to our pre-designed ideas. It was hard for him to not be in a good mood. However, the engineering captain knew that this was a big client. Anything could be discussed if there was money to be made. He chuckled in response. This afternoon, the engineering team used integrated mapping equipment to complete the topography of the lake area. They had also received the Mystic Arts Research Society's blueprints. They pulled them out and communicated with OK and the others on a few specific issues. Xie Junping saw this scene. This was what he wanted to know. He rushed over to take a look. There were rigorous and neat engineering drawings, and there were also mysterious magic arrays. If it were a month ago, Xie Junping would have seen his brain explode when he was faced with the structures and symbols of mysticism that represented special images. But right now, under the influence of Dean Wan's fundamental studies of matter properties, even if he did not know much about some of the special symbols, he could basically guess 60 to 70% of them by observing their structure and direction. Of course, this was also because a group of amateurs had limited skills. As he watched, Xie Junping's expression became serious. Soon, a smile appeared on his face and he moved closer to Quebec, younger O. OK was so annoyed that he didn't even bother to show basic courtesy. He gritted his teeth and said, "Do you even want to check the construction qualification?" No need, no need. The Mystical Research Society had always been dependable. Actually, during this period of time, I've also begun to be interested in mysticism. I've also done some research in private. OK looked at him with a gaze that said, "Are you kidding me?" Xie Junping winked at him and slid his hand on the projection of the design drawings. From the design drawings, this is a combination of magic arrays. It's not complete enough. It might be a problem with the level. Seeing OK sneer, Xie Junping immediately continued. But it might also be because it needs to be coordinated with the mysterious ritual in time. If it can really be activated, I think that the extraordinary, the direction of magic power, should be from the 4 sides of the lake to the center of the lake. The final destination is the withered tree sandbank. Am I right? OK subconsciously looked at Old Hai, who had shrunk back. He told you. Xie Junping laughed and continued to communicate. In terms of the overall structure of this set of drawings, does it lack a point of qualitative change? This time, OK was really shocked. You really know? No, I was just blindly thinking. I thought that if I could see it with my eyes, there would definitely not be such a big mistake with so many professionals like you. Of course not. OK still gave a certain amount of respect to professionals. He reached out and pointed at the center of the lake in the dark. We will use flame to represent sublimation. The qualitative change will happen after the withered tree is ignited. Sure enough. Kids nowadays are so stubborn. When Xie Junping thought about the secret space in the withered tree and the rabid dog that could fly into a rage at any moment, he felt that it was not a good thing to watch the young man seek his own death. He wanted to earn some merit from the living. Junior brother O, the Holistic Research Society is indeed full of wonderful ideas. But about the burning of the tree, we need to talk about it. OK looked at him warily. Senior Xie, you don't know much about our society's activities, so there is no need to say some things. You also know nothing about the terror of some people. Since he had grasped the situation, Xie Junping stopped smiling and stared at Quebec. Brother, no matter what activity it is, it must conform to the rules of the game. OK had long wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality. Hearing this, he sneered again. Are you talking about the school's approval? The school office, the student council, the parent-teacher conference, including the society office that Senior Xie is in. If there are any missing procedures, feel free to mention it. If there is one missing, the project will be immediately dropped. But if you can't find it, don't talk nonsense here. When it came to procedures, Xie Junping really choked. For a big society like the Mystic Arts Research Society, they had honed their skills in all kinds of materials and procedures. It was not easy to find loopholes, and it was even more difficult to say anything in a short period of time. While he was choking, OK turned to the others around and shouted, "Listen up, the society's task is very important. Before Christmas Eve, the layout of this place must be completed, and internal experiments must be carried out at least 3 times. Otherwise, the opening of the activity week will be a messy scene, and we will only be able to clean up the mess. Keep your eyes open for the next 2 days. Don't let those irrelevant people come and cause trouble. If you encounter any troublemakers, tell them to get lost." This was not just pointing at the mulberry tree, but scolding the locust tree. It was basically scolding Xie Junping. And among the society members that OK brought, there were very few wily old foxes like Old Hai. Most of them were newbies who had just entered the society, or perhaps they had long been aware of this. They had been working like cows and horses for the society for many years. Each and every one of them responded to the vice president's admonishment without end. They behaved extremely obediently, setting off OK's imposing manner. Xie Junping cursed OK in his mind for not recognizing good intentions. He was just about to think of another method when a voice suddenly entered his ears. It was very familiar. "If it wasn't for you tormenting me, I would probably be in the same state right now." Huh. The corner of Xie Junping's eyes jumped. He turned his head to look and saw the crazy dog protecting his home, that he had just cursed silently. He didn't know when, but he was already not far behind Xie Junping. He was leaning against the shore of the lake, casting his gaze very calmly. "Are you a ghost? When did you get here?" "Just now." Only now did Xie Junping understand the meaning of Luo Nan's words just now. Luo Nan was probably talking about the unforeseen event that happened on the day they first met. Luo Nan brushed shoulders with the Mystic Arts Research Society, but he had an even better opportunity. "Yeah, you want to thank me." Xie Junping was just about to tease Luo Nan when he saw Luo Nan's overly calm gaze. His heart twitched a bit. Speaking of which, Luo Nan was a master of perception that was publicly acknowledged throughout the world. Even if they were in the underground laboratory, this bit of distance was completely meaningless to him. And from multiple channels of information, Luo Nan seemed to be getting more and more used to using his fists to solve problems. Could it be that a murder was going to happen at Gear tonight? He subconsciously wanted to ease the atmosphere. Let's not get angry with a child. "Hey, you came out wearing this?" Xie Junping suddenly noticed that Luo Nan's upper body was only wearing a thin shirt despite the freezing weather. There was the school badge of Acumen College on his chest. Were all awake in this willful? Luo Nan went, "Oh." It seemed that he was completely indifferent to the bitter cold weather. At the same time, he was completely indifferent to what was happening at the shore of the lake. This wasn't right. Xie Junping was a bit stupefied. He subconsciously wanted to find more evidence, but he turned his head and saw Shui lay not far away. There was also Rui Wen, the person they were looking for. Oh, wasn't the jacket that the little girl was wearing Luo Nan's? He couldn't see anything else clearly due to the dim lighting. From the looks of it, could it be that she accidentally fell into the water? Xie Junping didn't have the time to think too much at this moment. OK had finished venting his temper at the group of laborers, and he saw a few more people appear at the shore of the lake. It must be known that he had just said that he was going to get rid of the miscellaneous people. Wasn't this a slap to his face? OK's baby face turned green. He was just about to open his mouth to berate Luo Nan. Luo Nan suddenly walked up to him. Vice President. As a member of the society, I wish to express my opinion. Xie Junping cried out in his mind. Oh no. OK was stunned for a moment. Only now did he clearly see Luo Nan's face. Luo Nan was more or less a celebrity figure in the Mystic Arts Research Society. Everyone knew that he had borrowed someone else's identity to enter the society. Not to mention his ability, his connections were certainly solid. OK's brain spun for a while before he realized that Luo Nan and Xie Junping were on the same side from the start. But during this moment of stupefaction, Luo Nan had already continued speaking. I participated in the reconstruction of the basic design of the Elusis mystic apparatus. I also analyzed and calculated the basic framework of the Star of David. I didn't consider supernatural powers at the time. Or perhaps I should say the problem of magical powers. It doesn't have the capacity to carry this. It's impossible to go from 0 to 1. It's even more impossible to sublimate from 1 to 100. If the Star of David is still the key structure of the mystic apparatus, then there's no need for us to waste our efforts. What nonsense are you spouting? OK instinctively berated. But when he saw Luo Nan's eyes in the darkness, he felt an indescribable emptiness in his heart. His voice dropped 2 octaves. How laughable. The final structure optimization was guided by a true master of the mystic arts. Then did the master advise you that this is just a dazzling trick at most? It's more suitable for amusing people indoors. It's not something that can be piled up into a different result by simply enlarging the scale. The one who spoke these words was not Luo Nan. Instead, it was a young woman with a rather pleasant voice. However, the most eye-catching thing was that the newcomer approached from afar. When she arrived at the lakeside, she went directly to Luo Nan's side. She gently pulled on the crook of Luo Nan's arm and kissed him. Luo Nan's brows furrowed for a moment. OK looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His baby face was flushed red with shame and indignation. Even his voice became sharp. Senior Sister Fei. Xie Junping shivered. In an instant, the lakeside seemed to have entered the filming location of a third-rate melodrama. The atmosphere of the early stages completely collapsed. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.